In a cold tunnel, a strange moaning sound echoed through the tunnel, sending chills down one's spine. Suddenly, a green hand stretched out with long, sharp claws. Several green-skinned demons emerged from nowhere, filling a basket and emitting terrifying screams like those in a horror movie. Their numbers were countless, yet a cloaked figure bravely charged towards them. Kai drew his sword. A moment later, the green-skinned demons leapt forward to attack. Suddenly, a strange light caused them to freeze. Kai, who was standing before them, had vanished, or rather the hooded figure had taken care of all of them in a few brief seconds. The green-skinned demons were now being torn apart by Kai's sword. Kai shouted loudly, "Kessel, are you ready?" With that, he stamped his foot heavily, causing the ground to shake. Kessel retorted angrily, "Don't regret it." Immediately after Kessel finished off the remaining demons, the green-skinned demons were frozen in fear. Kessel coldly swung his sword to finish them off. A moment later, the cave was littered with the bodies of the dead green-skinned demons. Kessel remarked, "I didn't think killing these goblins would take so much time." "But Master is still behind us, isn't he?" Kai asked. "Oh, the goblins our Master has tamed are all gone. As for whether Master is still behind us, let me check," Kessel replied. "Is that really necessary? We're connected all the time." The two were about to leave when a figure appeared behind them. Kai said, "This doesn't feel right." Kessel shrugged and said, "You're worrying too much, Kai." Suddenly, Kessel also sensed something unusual behind him. He turned around and said, "What's going on?" This is quite a shock. Immediately, both men were taken aback by their opponent's appearance. Green skin, sharp teeth, and sunken eyes. Kessel exclaimed, "Ah, Kai, it's an orc." The green-skinned demon roared, spitting saliva everywhere. He was wielding a massive weapon. Kai said apprehensively, "Damn it, let's retreat and regroup with our master." But Kessel disagreed. He said resolutely, "No need for that," and charged forward like a rocket. Kai was caught off guard and couldn't stop him. Kessel shouted, "A mere orc is nothing compared to my past life." The green-skinned demon raised his weapon. With a light flick of his wrist, the two weapons clashed, producing a deafening sound. Kessel, enraged, used all his strength to charge forward once more. The distance between the two was very close. The green-skinned demon blocked Kessel's attack with his shoulder. A flash of light appeared. Kessel was sent flying to the ground. Kai exclaimed, "You idiot! You're not like you were in life." Suddenly, a staff appeared, and a glowing ball of fire emerged from it. A powerful electric current ran through. The staff stuck to this demon's body, causing it to scream in pain. The demon struggled and let out a deafening scream. At this moment, someone held up a card. A handsome young man shouted, "Kai Kessel, step back. Leave this to us." The card in the young man's hand began to take effect. The dark cave was illuminated by the card's light. Kai and Kessel turned to look. A large ball of fire appeared above the young man's head. A moment later, he threw the fireball forward. The demon covered its eyes. The fireball engulfed the demon under everyone's watchful eyes. The cave shook due to the demon's screams. Kessel watched this scene and exclaimed in delight, "Wow, that's amazing. Are you sure you're not a great magician, Master?" The black hooded figure Chris approached the young man and asked, "Are you okay?" Master Kim Hyun-bak, looking tired and covering his eyes, replied, "Ugh, that's pathetic. I'm out of mana just from that." Chris skillfully supported Kim Hyun-bak, saying, "But that was still a significant improvement, wasn't it?" Kim Hyun-bak stood up with difficulty, sighed, and said, "Is that so?" Kim Hyun-bak thought to himself, "A significant improvement in the past. It was unimaginable. From then on, I really didn't do anything." Recalling the past, Kim Hyun-bak thought, "Back then, I simply hid under a blanket until I was the only one left. All these strange things happened 3 months ago. The entrance to my apartment started connecting to a dungeon. It sounds ridiculous, but I got stuck in this apartment. At first, I was quite overwhelmed. The first time I explored the dungeon, I thought I'd become like a protagonist in a fantasy novel. But the illusion was short-lived when I encountered real goblins. They were terrifying. They saw me and chased after me. I was almost killed by their poison. I was just a few minutes away from crossing the river Styx, but somehow I survived due to an unknown force." Suddenly, a screen appeared with a system notification. "Congratulations, you have survived. You have met the criteria to become a dungeon explorer." Kim Hyun-bak hid under the blanket, fearful and disillusioned after experiencing near death. He became a recluse, shutting himself indoors and becoming a highly introverted person. Went to several forums to seek help, but no one believed me, and contacting the police or fire station was also ineffective. However, one day on the dungeon web, I found others who were in a similar situation. On the web, there were not only guides for the dungeon and market area, but also some tips. And we could also see the quest that was assigned to us. Dungeon 0795 was the one connected to my house, and I had to conquer this place along with others who were connected to it. But since I was a coward, I thought that one of the 30 people would surely be able to conquer this dungeon. Instead of me, yes. And in the end, I still had to come out and hunt because I needed food to survive, and I would receive money if I killed monsters with which I could buy essential items from the market on the web. But after reading a post that said, "The deeper you go, the stronger the monsters become," I became cowardly and chose to survive by killing a few goblins. After 3 months, I knew that only 5 people were left alive, and I started to panic. I didn't think that so many had died, and if all the other explorers were dead too. What was I supposed to do? Was I going to survive my whole life by hunting goblins? Just then there was a faint knock at the door. A hand with extremely long nails peeked inside, looking around cautiously. Kim Hyunbok started searching frantically. He was worried that if that monstrous thing came over to this side, what would he do? He had a strong conviction that there must be a way to resolve this. Just then Kim Hyunbok saw a post from someone who, like him, had received a quest. He or she wanted to challenge the boss's lair the next day, and wanted the remaining 5 survivors to form a team together. In that instant, Kim Hyunbok exclaimed with joy, "Ha ha, there are other survivors, I still have hope." But his joy didn't last long. The next day he received shocking news. When he looked at the screen, he saw that only 1 person was left out of the 30 participants. Kim Hyunbok felt like he had been electrocuted, and he wondered, "Am I really going to die in this terrifying situation? There are only 204 days left. What am I supposed to do?" Kim Hyunbok thought, and then he let out a loud scream. In the dark tunnel, several other goblins were patrolling, looking around seriously. But they didn't notice Kim Hyunbok hiding nearby. Suddenly, Kim Hyunbok and his tamed goblin charged out from both ends holding clubs. The leader of the goblins let out a loud roar. Kim Hyunbok quickly smashed its mouth. Then he dealt with the other 2. The last goblin looked stupid looking around for a while, and then it was caught from behind. Kim Hyunbok ordered quickly catch the last one. Kim Hyunbok quickly grabbed his tools and ran over. He decisively stabbed the last goblin, which let out a painful scream. A moment later, it breathed its last. The tunnel became quiet. Kim Hyunbok breathed a sigh of relief. He used a knife to cut his fingertip, and a little blood flowed out. The blood dripped down slowly, and then it dripped onto the chest of the goblin. Kim Hyunbok thought, "Please let this work this time." A moment later, a strong light emanated, and both Kim Hyunbok and his minions stared in awe. The goblin slowly sat up. Kim Hyunbok thought, "Yes, it's done." This time, it seemed to have worked. As he said this, a strange air current enveloped both the goblin and Kim Hyunbok. Suddenly, Kim Hyunbok felt strange. He thought, "What's going on? Why do I feel dizzy?" As he thought this, his body felt drained of strength. Recalling the past, Kim Hyunbok sat under the blanket thinking that he was the only one left. He had tried to sleep to forget the reality, and posted desperate pleas for help, but all he got were scolding replies. He had no other choice but to conquer the dungeon alone if he didn't want to be stuck there forever. Later on his phone, he saw something extremely interesting. He had to determine his own skills. It turned out that he had control and mana, which were magic-related. He could check his abilities through the dungeon app on the web with the same name. Finally, using mana and his control skill, he learned the taming skill, which could turn goblins into his minions. He tested it on a goblin, and it worked. He tried it again on another, and it worked too, but his body was too weak at the moment. It seemed like he had reached his limit. He was running out of mana. Kim Hyunbok was so exhausted that he was sweating profusely. Suddenly, a familiar bell rang, snapping him back to reality. Kim Hyunbok looked deep into the dark tunnel. He told his goblins to turn back. "Let's go back quickly. Come here and help me." Back in his room, the doorbell stopped ringing, replaced by the sound of a normal clock. Kim Hyunbok thought to himself, "I need to recover quickly. I don't have much time left." Just then, he looked forward, and the sunlight peeking into the room brightened it up. This gave Kim Hyunbok a bit of motivation. There was something he had discovered on the dungeon web. Magic and the abilities linked to it were extremely dangerous and were the key to successful conquest when people worked together. But when everyone was supposed to conquer the dungeon together, he had been cowardly hiding in his room. Thinking about this, Kim Hyun-bok became angry and slammed his fist on the wall. He gritted his teeth, thinking, "Damn it, if I had joined in earlier! Sometimes I think I could have cleared this dungeon successfully. If only I had left the room and participated with the others. I wouldn't be the only one left behind. I'm really terrible." And the atmosphere in the room becomes silent. The two goblins see their master like this and look at each other confused. The system announces Dungeon 0795 Rank F. 272 days remaining. Kim Hyun-bok has conquered 3 days. Status: sleeping in the hallway. Kim Hyun-bok lies unconscious on the floor. Just then the doorbell rings again, and Kim Hyun-bok wakes up with a start. He grasps his staff. Kim Hyun-bok's hand tightly grips the large axe, tense and staring intently at the door. The door remains still locked tight. He is surprised and wonders if he just imagined it. Suddenly the doorbell rings again, making him jump in shock. He is stunned and unable to speak. His hand hesitates as he reaches for the door handle. Finally, he musters the courage to open it. With both hands holding the staff high, the two green goblins rush out, and he shouts loudly, trying to appear fierce. But there is no one in front of him. There is only a cardboard box left at the door. He looks at the box, puzzled, and wonders if it's for him. The box has a delivery label on it. Elsewhere, someone checks the delivery status on their phone and smiles, saying, "It seems he has received the gift." A bald-headed, dark-skinned man stands behind the president sorcerer, looking displeased. He asks, "Sir, have you sent another gift?" The old man with a bare chin looks back calmly and raises a finger, confident. "I'm investing in the future. Most of them won't make it past a year, but they have potential." The bald-headed man immediately objects. "It's not worth investing just because they have potential." The old man turns to face him. "Don't worry, I only spent $3,000 today." The man looks frustrated and sweaty. "But sir, you've already spent a total of $900,000 on this. Do you know how many people you've bought things for? 900,000 is not a small amount." The president sorcerer rests his chin on his hand, looking at the computer screen unconcerned. "As you said, it's a small budget." He thinks that one day, the person will grow stronger, and he is determined to help. "If I help them in their time of need, they will remember it forever." He raises his finger, looking pleased. "Even if only one part of them develop, I think it's still worth investing in." The other man shakes his head and sighs. "Not arguing further. I understand what you mean, but I don't think I can do it. It just seems like wasting money." The old man responds calmly. "It's good that you understand." He stands up, supporting himself on the chair. "Since you're a member of the government, you should understand." The man nods seriously. "Yes, sir." The old man smiles, thinking to himself, wondering what the outcome will be this time. On the other side, Kim Hyun-bok opens the gift box, thinking, "A gift from the sorcerer." Inside the box are 2 books and a letter. "I read your post on the bulletin board. It seems you're in a difficult situation, so I decided to send you 2 books that I bought with my own money." He reads the letter and looks at the 2 books. "Maybe they will help you." Signed, President Sorcerer. The 2 books make him immediately recall a warning post he read recently. He starts to think, this person is giving me books worth $2,000 each. Are they fake? He decides to open the book to check. He has read many posts about people being scammed because of books like this. As soon as Kim Hyun-bok touches the book, it emits a blinding light, making him exclaim in surprise, "Oh, this is unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it." He remembers someone saying that real books would glow like this, and he starts to believe it's genuine. Looking at the 2 books, he becomes emotional, and tears well up in his eyes. "I don't know who you are, President Sorcerer, but I promise to remember your kindness forever." It's late at night, and the 2 green goblins are lying on the ground sleeping. He starts using the book to learn. His fingertips emit a magical blue glow. He says to himself, "Controlling mana is like swinging a swing. It's all about balance and imagination." Kim Hyun-bok flips through the book, looking tired and scratching his head. It seems quite challenging. I should have studied harder when I was younger. He looks at the intricate drawings on the paper and realizes it will take him 30 minutes to cast his first magic circle. However, it's faster than 4 days ago. While sitting and reading, he tells himself that with more practice, he will get faster. Suddenly, a goblin, still half asleep, walks in and pokes his hand. A screen appears, and he selects an option, thinking to himself, I have something to do today. The dungeon penalty. If I don't enter the dungeon regularly, my level and stats will decrease. He picks up his large staff, and along with the goblins opens the door to head out. Let's go. Upon reaching the dungeon, the goblins and he hide behind a rock, observing the untamed creatures outside. After some time, he becomes more accustomed to this. He commands the 2 goblins to charge forward and fight. The group works together, taking down the enemies. After defeating each enemy, he places a magic circle on their heads to tame them. Each time he tames one, he feels relieved and proud. Kim Hyunbak opened the system to check and was satisfied, saying it wasn't bad and that he still had a lot of mana. He hid behind a rock, looked out, and thought to himself that he should dare to go and tame another one. Inside the dungeon, there were several skeleton creatures with glowing red eyes, standing motionless, which startled him. He thought in amazement that these must be skeletons. Seeing these seemingly powerful creatures, he felt a bit frightened and sweaty, hesitating for a while about whether he should try to tame them too. He calculated to himself that if he could tame them like the goblins, it would be very useful. But then he thought, wait, they're just skeletons. What's the point? As he was sweating and calculating, 2 goblins started fighting each other. He wasn't concerned about the goblins fighting. Instead, he focused on stroking his chin and looking at the system to figure out how to tame the monsters. He needed both his own blood and that of the creatures. A clever goblin looked at him in confusion, as if wondering if it was okay to let the 2 goblins continue fighting. He was hesitant again, looked out at the skeletons, and thought that they didn't have blood, just bones. He opened the system again to check, but thought that just killing them wouldn't be worth it. He decided to check their stats. The system immediately displayed the functions of each skeleton in front of him. After reading, his eyes widened in surprise, and he exclaimed that these creatures were clearly more powerful than the mindless goblins. Kim Hyunbak immediately pointed at the skeletons and shouted orders to the goblins, telling them to capture the skeletons, saying he would handle it later. The goblins immediately rushed to fight and soon bound the skeletons. He looked at the tied-up skeleton on the ground, feeling a bit at a loss, and sighed, wondering how to tame it. Everything he had found before was useless in this situation. He thought painfully that nothing useful came to mind. With no other choice, he placed the magic circle on the skeleton's face, guessing he couldn't be picky, and tried to sense it. He closed his eyes, clasped his hands together, and felt the mana. The blue light emitted from his hands, and the magic circle similar to when he tamed the goblins. The skeleton lay still, its body illuminated by the blue light, as he gradually transferred mana into it. Suddenly, the bound skeleton's body trembled slightly. Its whole body shook and then stopped, lying still on the ground without any movement. After finishing, he gently removed the magic circle from its face. The skeleton's eyes changed from red to blue, and it looked much more docile. He was pleased and exclaimed, "Great, it's done!" He was sweating all over, opened his mouth in shock, and thought that following his intuition was the right decision. Taming it made him even more excited. He decided to continue exploring, but felt extremely tired and unable to do anything else. He opened the system to check and saw that his abilities had decreased significantly. He realized that the skeleton had consumed a lot of his mana. Unable to continue, he led his group away, temporarily deciding to return for now. The skeleton followed him obediently. The system displayed that it was female, and its other stats were fine. It stood still outside the door, not moving. He looked at it, scratched his head, and felt awkward realizing it was once a girl. He decided to give her a name. With his arms crossed and standing straight, he looked at her seriously and declared, "From now on, your name is Christina." As soon as he finished speaking, the skeleton's eyes emitted a bright blue light. That night, he was so tired that he fell asleep without knowing anything. Christina wrapped herself in a blanket, sat beside his bed, and watched him. She sat there quietly, making no sound. Suddenly, images appeared in her mind. Memories of when she was alive, fighting alongside her companions in the dungeon against something fierce. The thing they fought was deep inside the dark dungeon, with red glowing eyes and mouth, and was terrifying. She was beaten and lay weak on the ground. Eventually she died and turned into a skeleton. Recalling those scenes, she unconsciously raised her bony hand to look at it. She felt despair and hopelessness slamming her fist on the floor, having to accept the reality that she was now just a skeleton. The next morning, when the sun was high, he woke up with a yawn, stretching, and asking what was going on, why it was so noisy so early. He got out of bed, still half asleep, and was startled to see Christina sitting there wrapped in a blanket, and he shouted. His eyes widened, and he was sweating with fear, almost having a heart attack. But then he remembered that he had brought the skeleton home the day before. Seeing that she looked different, he sat down beside her concerned, and asked Christina what's wrong. She moved her jaw, as if trying to speak. Finally, she joyfully exclaimed, "Good morning, master." He was shocked and frightened, shouting, "It can talk." Seeing him panicked and covered in goosebumps, she quickly calmed him down, saying, "Please don't be alarmed, master. I'm using mana to speak, but it won't last long." He was still flustered, responding, "You're really a high-class skeleton, aren't you?" she said seriously. "It's all thanks to you, master." She explained to him that since he had named her, she was able to recall some memories from her past life and could now speak. He listened, eyes wide. He was sweating, looking at her, and asked, "Sorry, but can you explain in more detail?" Between him and her, there were suddenly blue lights connecting the two. He asked Chris, "Aren't you just a simple skeleton? How can you use mana talk and even have feelings?" Christina bowed her head and said, "As I just said, it's all thanks to the name." He was surprised and asked, "Just a name, that's all." To his surprise, she stood up abruptly, reacting very intensely, and shouted, "It's not just a name." Her attitude startled both him and the goblins. She continued shouting, "You should know that a name is a person's identity. It's a very important thing to distinguish oneself in a collective setting." Kim Hyunbok hurriedly reminded her to calm down and apologize. She became flustered, sweating, and put her hand on her chin, immediately lowering her voice. "I'm sorry. For those who have been stripped of their names like me, this is really a very significant thing." He listened and became even more confused, asking again, "Those who have been stripped of their names." She raised a finger and explained cheerfully, "It's like this." Recalling the rotting skeletons in the dungeon, she said, "Those who lose their sense of self and even their soul will become the lowest creatures in the dungeon. I existed like that until yesterday." After hearing this, he felt a bit sad. "So do you know who took away your name?" She looked down at the ground, her face filled with regret and sadness. "I don't know." She pulled the blanket around her, saying, "Because my memories haven't fully returned yet." Chris wrapped her arms around herself. "However, I remember one thing. The monster in the dungeon. It's a terrifying existence." Suddenly, his whole body shuddered as if he felt her fear. He thought in surprise, "Is Chris's feeling connecting with mine?" He looked down at his hand, which was shaking uncontrollably. "Don't tell me there's something extremely terrifying in that dungeon." The two goblins approached to comfort Chris, who was shivering with fear. Seeing this, he wondered if he had the ability to resist something like that. With his current strength, he was definitely not capable. He clenched his teeth, angry, and shouted, "Damn it!" Chris and the goblins quickly looked up at him. "What do you want me to do now? First I'm dragged into this, and now I have to fight a monster like that." The more he spoke, the more agitated he became. His whole body trembled, and sweat soaked through his clothes. He grasped his hair tightly, feeling desperate. "And if I die, not even my soul will remain. How can something like that exist? It's not fair." Christina saw his state and approached him, placing her hand on his. "Master, I will use all my strength to help you survive." She sat down opposite him, placing her hands on his, comforting him sincerely. "So don't be too afraid." He was also moved, looking at Chris. The two goblins, though unable to speak, stood beside them, their fists clenched in a show of absolute support. He smiled slightly and called out to them. He was a bit surprised to see how enthusiastic they were towards him. He didn't know what to say. In the end, he accepted the situation, sighed, and said, "Thank you. I'm counting on you all." Chris was stroking the head of a goblin when he suddenly asked her, "Chris, tell me about your memories that you've recovered. Anything is fine. It might be helpful." She sat up straight and began to recount everything she remembered. "First but after saying a little, she couldn't speak anymore. She was sweating all over, looking puzzled. In the end, she had to use characters to communicate with him. After finishing her story, she smiled cheerfully, spreading her hands, and said, 'Don't panic, Master. I'm using my mana to communicate.' He was surprised and asked, 'Does that mean you've run out of mana?' She nodded in agreement. Seeing this, he said, 'Well, that's that then. We'll just have to wait until your mana recovers. So what should we do until then?' Suddenly his eyes widened in surprise. Chris was wearing headphones. The sight of her wearing headphones and using a computer was quite bizarre. She seemed to be very skilled at fiddling with things. Seeing this, he also opened his system to check Chris's abilities. It seems she has the language skill. She looks quite happy. However, upon checking her stats in the system, he found that there was no language skill listed. But she had many good stats and some new skills he had never seen before, including a gift feature. The more he looked, the more interesting things he found. C+ level magic. I should ask her to teach me some new tricks later. Kim Hyunbok stroked his chin, thinking it would be great if she could teach him magic. If I learn magic, Chris and I can attack from the backlines. I should tame a few more skeletons to stand in front of us. Just then, Christina's computer screen displayed a connection failed message, making her frustrated and confused. She sat there looking helpless while he was still engrossed in his plans. Seeing her getting flustered and frustrated with her computer, he smiled and thought I should buy her a decent computer. She's really pitiful. "Chris, I want to ask you something," he said. "Yes, Master. Please go ahead," she replied. He asked, "You said you were a magician in your past life, right?" Chris nodded vigorously. "That's right." Kim Hyunbok placed his hand on his chest and bowed his head. "Please teach me magic," he requested. "Of course I'd be happy to," she replied. Chris took out paper and pen and began to draw carefully. He stood watching intently, thinking Chris's magical knowledge is beyond imagination. He asked her, "Do I have to draw everything every time?" She replied, "It depends on the situation, but—" I tried, and the magic circles printed out were all effective. Chris was surprised by Hyunbok's words. The automatic magic circle generator. Why did he recall the conversation with Chris at the beginning? Hyunbok confessed that she helped him understand several things in the book more easily. She explained how to gather magic and set up formations, as well as why he still couldn't create magic circles. Chris taught him about the structure of magic circles. Practicing his mind was the fastest way to create a magic circle. Hearing the male protagonist scratch his head, then he tried to draw carefully. Chris came closer to instruct him. "This part is wrong." And within just 1 week, he had learned a lot. He wanted to enter the dungeon after creating his own magic circle. But in the end, he had to leave home earlier because of that dungeon punishment. Hyun checked the transactions on the divine phone of this world, which was quite generous. The male protagonist went down to the dungeon with Chris. Chris spoke as she pushed others into hell, but also provided a way out. Hyunbok looked blankly ahead. Haha, at this moment he was busy thinking about entering the dungeon, but his thoughts were interrupted by the noise. They were fighting again. Chris reminded him that during the exploration, he should try to capture as many goblins as possible. "Don't complain," the male protagonist shouted coldly. "If you continue to fight, we'll have to leave you behind." 2 goblins knelt down, raised their hands, and submitted. Chris said to the male protagonist, "I think this is enough. All right, what are you going to do with these goblins? There are a few things I need to check." Chris stared at a goblin, making it afraid, and retreat to the corner of the wall. She continued, "It's about myself. Do you remember when we gathered mana together before we left?" "Yes, I remember." Although the formation was not wrong, and he had obtained a lot of mana, his mana hadn't changed at all. Chris's mana had increased from 10 to 100, and the male protagonists had too. "That's right, I forgot about that. Do you think it's because you have a problem? So your mana didn't increase?" "Yes, that's right. Chris reached out and choked the goblin. The goblin's eyes widened and its pupils shrunk. Chris lifted the goblin by the neck and it screamed miserably. Countless threads of energy were invading its body. Its teeth became sharper and its face became wrinkled. Chris smiled wickedly and said to the male protagonist, "I am an undead." Undead, I've become a monster, a dead creature. So my desire to live again is stronger than anyone else's. Chris covered her eyes and choked the goblin. The reason I couldn't absorb mana is that I'm already dead. Chris smiled. If an undead wants to become stronger, they must absorb the vitality of other living creatures. Chris clenched her fist. The male protagonist's hand trembled slightly. That's not the way of humans, but of monsters. Even if sacrificing others to save oneself was natural, he was sure she hated that more than anyone else. Hyunbok closed his eyes tightly with sweat on his forehead, proof that she was now a monster. The male protagonist put his hand on her shoulder and called out, "Chris, you once said you would do anything to preserve my life, didn't you?" "Yes, then this is an order. Become stronger, even if it means killing." Chris looked at the male protagonist in surprise. "What becomes stronger because of me? Even if you have to kill everything. And during that time, you can put all the blame on me, because this is entirely my order." Chris looked at Hyun in confusion. "Master, you are really kind," the male protagonist said in surprise, pointing at his face. "Huh, me?" Then he scratched his head awkwardly. "I just didn't have a choice, so I'm just making excuses to continue. Anyway, now absorb the rest," he said. "Yes, master." The goblins heard this and were frightened. "Hey, while we're talking, something is changing inside Chris. Luckily, I'm not a zombie." The male protagonist looked at her. "Huh. Is there a difference?" Chris explained that because zombies were still somewhat alive, they could become stronger faster. They needed to eat instead of absorb. Then they have to chew and swallow. Hyunbok imagined Chris as a zombie biting a goblin's hand. It was painful to endure. The male protagonist nodded repeatedly. "I'm also glad you're a scouter." "Master, how are my stats now? They've increased quite a bit." Although they hadn't increased much in the end, he thought he could increase them further if he continued to absorb goblins. "Then we need to find a stronger dungeon," he said. Just as they were talking, a hissing sound interrupted them. The male protagonist looked in the direction of the sound. Hiss, hiss. His goblins pointed ahead, reporting that there were enemies there. A group of ferocious goblins charged towards them. Chris turned around. "Master, leave it to me." The male protagonist looked at Chris in a daze. "You'll be okay alone, right?" Chris began to cast a spell. "You just step back and observe, Master." Chris's formation had a large seal in the center to control the surrounding area. Many small circles containing energy appeared, preparing to launch magic arrows. Chris's magic arrows flew towards the new group of goblins, making them widen their eyes in shock. Chris's skill was like a thunderbolt to them. The ones in the front fell, and those behind them were frightened and trembled. After Chris finished her spell, she also collapsed. Kim Hyunbok quickly held out his staff. He turned to look at her and shouted, "It's okay, just rest until you recover." He ordered the goblins he had tamed to capture the remaining ones. The two groups of goblins clashed. A person wielding a stick charged at him. It struck the other person with a hit. The two sides continued to fight each other frenziedly. The goblins that he had tamed were quite strong. They fought without getting tired, but were sometimes caught off guard. Fortunately, he quickly ran up and blocked a hit for it. Then he killed the other goblin. He didn't understand why they looked so similar, but he could still tell which goblin was his. Kim Hyunbok gritted his teeth and focused on fighting. He hit the goblins with his stick, knocking out their teeth. In the end, they realized it wasn't going well and turned around to run away. Kim Hyunbok shouted that they had all run away. He quickly urged his goblins to chase after them and catch all of them. After the battle, the goblins lay dead all over the ground. Kim Hyunbok's body was also full of wounds. His clothes were torn and bleeding. He threw his broken stick to the ground and cursed, although he had defeated them all. His own goblins had also died. Kim Hyunbok was devastated, hugging his head in despair. All the goblins he had tamed were dead. When he stood up, he saw hundreds of goblins approaching, their red eyes staring at him. He was frightened and thought they were running away in panic, but it turned out they were actually calling for reinforcements, not fleeing. He held his head in despair, pale with fear. wondering what to do next, whether he had to rebuild his army again. But it would probably just end in death again. Suddenly, Christina's face appeared. She stood behind him and asked if he was okay. Kim Hyun-buk clenched his fists tense and didn't respond. His eyes were lifeless, his whole body lacking vitality. He was shocked to hear her speak. "Please don't be too sad." She took off her hat and armor. "They are just goblins in the end. We have to deal with them. Just consider it unavoidable," she called out to him. "Let's go back for now. You need to heal your wounds." Her words were like a ray of light guiding him back to reality. Kim Hyun-buk knew she was right. He turned to look at her, trying to think positively. "It's just a small thing. If you're already panicking, you won't be able to do anything in the future." He forced a smile and said, "Let's go back, Christina." When they got back home, Kim Hyun-buk sat on a chair shirtless. Christina stood behind him. She raised her hand and a green light emanated from her palm, healing his wounds. The wounds quickly healed. Kim Hyun-buk asked curiously, "What are you doing?" She replied, "It's called rapid healing. It's a top-notch spell for minor wounds." She leaned in to explain. "Since you're now undead, I thought I wouldn't be able to use it anymore, but it seems I still can." Lucky me, Kim Hyun-buk started to touch his wounds, feeling they were all healed, and said, "That's really something." Her eyes lit up, and she brought her skull-like face close to his. More importantly, "Master, why don't you take this opportunity to get some protective gear? It'll be very dangerous if we encounter stronger enemies," she said, making him jump. He hadn't considered what she said, but when he checked his phone, it was true. His wallet wasn't exactly empty, but it wasn't overflowing either. He sat cross-legged on the ground, his hands clasped together. "The most basic armor costs $1,500, she said. "With our goal of conquering that dungeon, basic armor won't cut it." She knelt before him, raised her hand, and said, "Don't worry about the money." "I have a plan." He became excited. "Really?" she replied. "I'll post a tutorial on the forum, a tip or two." She explained to him, "If the post gets a lot of views, you'll get paid." "Right, I'm thinking of making a comprehensive guide on a few useful spells that'll be great." He was a bit skeptical. "Will it really work?" She smiled. "It's not like I'm sharing any crucial spells, just some low-level magic circles, so it might not even get much attention. Don't expect too much." He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "But it's still knowledge from a real magician, and it's worth something. Let's give it a try." He trusted her and put his faith in her. "I'll leave it to you, Christina." She smiled, her eyes shining. "I'll do my best." Before long, his phone showed a sum of more than 51,000. He stared at the amount, sweating profusely. Shocked. "It's not a small amount, is it, Christina?" She smiled smugly. "With this, we can even move our entire stronghold." "Really?" he exclaimed, surprised. She confirmed yes after paying the transfer fee. "You just need to enter your current address and the destination address, then you can move." He asked $50,000, she replied. "Yes, and the corresponding amount will be sent to your account the next day." "That's right, you'll get paid according to the number of views if you rank first on the forum." His eyes lit up. She continued normally. "You'd have to wait about 5 months to get paid, but I've negotiated with the admins to get it to you right away." He looked at her. "I understand if possible. Let's move to a place with more people." She placed her hand on her chest. "Don't worry. I'll take care of it." 4 days later, he opened the door. He stepped into a 4-room house with a living room and a separate kitchen. He had paid a $50,000 deposit and signed a 1-year lease. He was amazed at the house. It was quite comfortable. He looked out the window and was surprised to see an entire city right outside his house, with luxurious lights and a bustling crowd below. He looked down and wondered how he could move houses like this. Was it related to the admin that Chris mentioned earlier? His eyes widened and he broke out in sweat. She said she had negotiated with them to receive the money immediately. Maybe if he asked them, he could find a way to escape this place. He was lost in thought, staring out the window, when he was suddenly called out by Chris in a loud voice. "Master!" He asked Chris if she had noticed his unusual behavior. Her eyes sparkled as she shouted, "Control yourself! Master, there's no other way to survive except by conquering the dungeon. Isn't that what you've accepted?" He was taken aback, thinking that she could read his thoughts. He immediately argued, "But there must be another way to get out of here." She glared at him, shouting, Help him snap out of it, even if you manage to escape what? Then, if the consequences are even worse, will you run away again? He stared at her, listening to her scolding. It's time to stop thinking that running away will fix everything, Master. The sounds of laughter and screams came from outside, echoing in his ears. He clenched his fists. Then he turned around and punched the screen in front of him. He punched until his fists were bloody and shaking. Shouting, "Freedom is right in front of me." Chris was taken aback by his outburst. "I will go in there and survive," he shouted with all his might. "I will conquer the dungeon no matter the cost." The light emanating from his body grew stronger. It flowed out of his body like a torrent. Then it exploded, emitting an intense light that forced Chris to cover her face. She looked at the light and recognized it as a surge of mana. Kim Hyunbuk stared at his hands in a daze. "What is this?" he asked, bewildered. She explained hastily. Magic is a field of study based on the development of the mind. The growth of mental power is naturally linked to the development of magical abilities. She looked excited. "You can be considered a true magician now, Master." He listened, feeling pleased. "So this means—" He touched his chest where a blue light was emanating. "The magical energy is circulating within me." Inside the cave, Chris looked at him, now fully armored. "Now that you've become a level 1 magician, you're much stronger, Master." He smiled, feeling confident. "I'm quite talented, aren't I?" She threw cold water on his enthusiasm. "About 90% of it is due to your equipment, Master." He was taken aback. "So it's not because I'm being praised," she added. "It's like getting a new coat of paint, isn't it?" He asked, annoyed. "Where did you learn to use such phrases?" She replied honestly, "I learned it from my world. People say there's nothing better than a dwarf's craftsmanship. I just adapted it to fit this world, Master." He sighed. "I think I've let you surf the internet too much." Looking at the 2 skeletons on the ground, he said, "Let's head back. Our goal for today was just these 2. The 2 skulls belonged to skeletons which he had defeated." Back home, he sat down, placing his hands on the talisman on the skull's face, and focused his mana just as he had done with Chris. Finally, the 2 skeletons had a mana heart, just like Chris. He thought he had successfully tamed them. He looked at the 2 skeletons, naming the blue-eyed one Castle and the gold-eyed one Kai. He asked Chris, "Is it working?" She replied, "I think it's best to control them for now, Master." He looked troubled, sweating. "Is it really necessary to do this?" she said. "There's no guarantee they'll become normal like me, Master." Her eyes sparkled as she gazed at the skeletons. The memories of death and being an undead are terrible. He looked at the 2 emotionless skeletons. "I guess we have to wait until they regain their memories." After a while, they stood before a wooden door. He said nervously, "I'm going to open it." He grasped the handle and slowly opened the door. As he opened it, Castle suddenly rushed out. He shouted in surprise, "Ah!" Castle fell to the ground, rolling around. Kai sat quietly in the corner. Kim Hyunbuk and Chris stood still, shocked. Chris approached Castle, shaking him. "I think this one has regained its memories." He pointed at Kai. "It seems like this one understands us, but it can't speak." Kai was making strange noises, looking angry. Chris explained, "These ones don't have vocal cords. I'm a special case master." She stood in front of him, greeting the 2 skeletons. "It's easier for me to communicate with them since we're similar." "Congratulations on getting a second chance, everyone." The 2 skulls stared at them, bewildered, without saying a word. She continued, "You know we've been stripped of our names, but we still have a chance to regain our past memories." She pointed at him. "It's all thanks to Master who gave us new names." He smiled joyfully, his face radiating the divine aura of a savior of humanity. Her singing was like music to his ears, or rather his master was the savior of humanity. Even he himself felt nauseous at his new title. The other 2 were deeply enlightened by his aura. They listened with their mouths agape, and he didn't expect this method to be so effective. Chris continued to brainwash them. However, their master was currently in a state of crisis, and this world was also experiencing a similar situation that had occurred in their previous world. The 2 of them watched as they knelt down, listening intently. To not lose their names again, they had to ensure their master's safety, and ultimately they would be able to complete what they had left undone in their previous lives. He was taken aback by her words. Now was the time to take the oath, swearing that they would dedicate their lives to their master. Of course, he would also take the oath. She placed her hands on her chest, and mana light radiated from her. I swear with my entire soul and the name given to me by my master, as long as you allow me to live for the sake of magic, I vow to be eternally loyal. Suddenly, he also stepped forward, and the two of them connected with each other through mana. She raised her hand towards the two skull-headed individuals. Now it's your turn. If you dare to say no, I will kill you both right here. The two of them were immediately intimidated. Okay. He was surprised to see that they were also radiating blue mana light. They shouted in unison, "We swear with our entire souls and our new names." Kai spoke up. "On the condition that you help me take revenge on Castle, I will, and help me fulfill my wish." They chimed in unison. "We vow to dedicate our entire hearts to our master, who has given us our names." The mana light emanating from him grew brighter. He widened his eyes in surprise. The blue mana light cut through their bonds. "From now on, we are brothers. I entrust my fate to you two, Kasla and Kai." Kasle seemed annoyed. He pointed at his face and shouted, "You will pay for this." Kai, on the other hand, was more gentle, smiling and saying, "I entrust my fate to you, milady, and our master." Chris leaned on her hand. "I think it's because our connection has grown stronger, allowing us to communicate without mana." He nodded in agreement. "How convenient." Kim Hyunbok looked at the two of them and said, "Now, can you tell me more about your goals? I think it's better to know beforehand." Castle spoke up first. "As I mentioned earlier, I want revenge, but to be honest, I don't really remember the details." Thinking about it made him angry. He cracked his knuckles. "A debt of blood must be repaid with blood. That's the rule of mercenaries. I need to find the dog who killed me and give him a proper burial." "Castle used to be a mercenary." Kai said, "My family has a treasured heirloom, a statue of a knight pointing his sword towards the sky." He continued, "When my older brother entered the dungeon, we lost contact with him, and the family treasure was lost along with him." Kai clenched his fist, determined. "My mission is to find it and bring it back." He was a former knight. Chris also shared, "In my previous life, I was a magician, and I still am. My goal is to reach a higher level of magic than I did in my previous life." After the three of them finished speaking, they looked at him expectantly. He realized it was his turn. He broke out in a cold sweat, feeling embarrassed. "My name is Kim Hyunbok, and my goal is to survive." He furrowed his brow, gritting his teeth. "I almost died once, and I don't want to experience that fear again." That time he was chased by terrifying monsters. Even when he slept, he was still fearful, and he didn't want to go through that terrifying experience again. He placed his hand on his left chest, looking at them sincerely. "Please help me survive." The three skeletons looked at each other, somewhat skeptical. Finally, they smiled and chimed in unison. "We really like your honesty, my lord," one of them said. "Normally, who wants to die? I will follow our lord to the end." Follow our lord. Seeing their enthusiasm, he felt a surge of joy. "I will do everything in my power to help you, my lord." He beamed with joy looking at them. "I entrust my fate to you from now on." He held a stick and swung it high. He struck a goblin on the head with all his might. He stood before the cave entrance, with the bodies of several goblins behind him. He looked down at his hands in surprise. His hands were radiating blue light. Chris hurriedly said, "My lord, please keep your hands like that." She looked at his bleeding hands and said, "Our lord has overcome his anger and despair and has found determination within himself." The mana within him surged, radiating outward. Thanks to his mental awakening, the flow of mana within his body began to release. Kai's eyes lit up as he prepared to attack. He charged forward with his sword, slicing through the air. He killed countless goblins with his sword. A loud shout echoed through the air, calling out his name. "Kite!" It was Castle. He charged forward with his sword, slicing through the goblins. He swung his sword with great force, sending goblins flying into the air. Luckily, Kai managed to dodge the sword strike. He was furious, scolding Castle. "You almost killed me, you idiot," Castle retorted. "I said you dodged it, didn't I?" Kim Hyunbok's mana recovered. He smiled. "Having such loyal soldiers is great." Chris also felt the same, smiling. "I didn't expect you to have time to practice magic now." After finishing a battle, several people charged forward. "Now we can speed up the process of punishing the dungeon." Castle was very excited, holding his sword and charging forward. "Your father will skewer all of you." Kai followed behind, reminding Castle not to go too far. As they ventured deeper, they saw a door with strange patterns. "However, I didn't think I would find the boss's location so soon." He took out the device and read the information from previous explorers, which stated that inside there would be 1 goblin and 20 other soldiers. Castle was impatient, carrying his sword and urging everyone to hurry up. "Let's just go in and hunt them down right away." Kai calmly reminded him not to be careless, or they would be in trouble. But Chris said there would be a monster, a boss inside, and it wouldn't be like the usual goblins. She looked at him and mentioned that the post on the forum was also published quite a while ago, so it wasn't very reliable. She suggested that they should prepare thoroughly before entering. "What do you think?" But if he wanted to enter right away, she would still follow him. He thought she made sense and agreed to temporarily return. It's better to be cautious. The 2 others sighed in agreement. When they returned home, the 2 skeletal warriors were sitting there cleaning their weapons. He called out to Chris and she turned around. "What is it?" He held up the device for her to see. "Have you checked your stats yet?" On the screen, her stats appeared. The 2 others came over to take a look. He said that compared to the previous time, all of her stats had increased significantly. Castle looked at the device and was delighted. "I didn't expect this little plastic thing to be able to check a person's stats." Kai also exclaimed, "It's so convenient." He was startled and turned to look at the 2 of them. "When did you 2 get here?" Kai asked humbly. "Master, can we also check our stats?" Castle also requested, "Yes, check ours too." "Master," he replied, "I was just about to check them." For Castle, the device displayed a lot of information, such as gender, race, sword skills, points, and several important stats. It was the same for Kai. Their stats were not much different. He checked their stats and praised them. "Your stats have increased a lot, and you've even gained some new skills." One of them said, "Master, you should check your own stats too." That was a good idea. He agreed and said, "Okay, let me check." Then he nervously looked at the device. The device displayed his stats, which were a bit different from theirs. They exclaimed, "Your level is the highest among us," but he felt it still wasn't enough. He said, "This is still nothing. If we make a single mistake, everything will be lost. So we need to prepare more thoroughly." The 3 skeletal warriors looked at each other. Castle nodded in agreement. Kai also concurred, saying, "It's good that you're being cautious, Master." Chris also thought so. She came up with an idea and said, "Now there's something we need to obtain." This made him puzzled. "What is it?" "It sounds difficult already," she replied. "It's called mana crystal dust." He looked at it on this internet and exclaimed, "Mana crystal dust, isn't that ridiculously expensive?" She held up 1 finger and said, "Yes, I want to buy about 1 kilogram. It's currently on sale for 50% off, so it'll cost $50,000. The large sum of money made him dizzy. He was sweating and thought, "I can't spend my savings like that, Chris." She wasn't worried at all, and happily made an okay sign. "I've browsed the web and it seems we can pay in installments monthly. It's a small matter." He was defeated and thought, "We're even buying on installment plans now." He helplessly asked, "Is it really necessary to have that?" She firmly replied, "Yes, it is." He then said, "All right, let's buy it then." She happily thanked him. He happily thanked. A few hours later, the goods had arrived. She hugged the box like it was treasure. "From now on, I'll focus on crafting items. Please don't bother me for a while." The 3 men looked at each other in confusion. He scratched his face, feeling a bit scared. "Sometimes she scares me." She then went into her room and closed the door. Kai said, "I have no idea what she's crafting, but it seems like it'll take a while before she comes out again." Castle also said, "It looks like it's just the 3 of us now. Let's go level up." The others agreed. Kim Hyunbok was furiously killing and beheading the skeletal warriors. Standing and looking at the bodies on the ground, Castle said, "This is the 287th one." He still hadn't found anyone worthy to be his companion. He looked at the 2 of them, unsure if it was just bad luck or if their luck had run out after several previous instances. Upon hearing Castle, he stood up and asked Luck, "Huh? Is that really the most important factor in a person's life?" Kai's eyes lit up. But no one can decide their own luck. Suddenly he remembered something. I have a skill called luck. It's really something. The other two were surprised. Luck, is that a good skill? He stroked his chin, thinking. I think it's a skill that activates in desperate situations. Kai looked puzzled. What kind of skill is that? Castle put his sword on his shoulder and said seriously. Then, Master, you need to be extremely cautious at all times. He was startled and asked why. Castle explained to him. Luck always needs to be balanced on the scales, or it's just a rumor among mercenaries. If luck brings good things in life, it also means it will bring bad things. Looking at the piles of bones on the ground, he said, so if good luck saves you in desperate situations, then at other times it will turn into bad luck. An Huang Mang asked, is that why we haven't found anyone with talent? Because it relies on good luck in desperate situations. Castle hefted his sword and replied, it's possible. Kai smiled optimistically, but thinking about the Lord discovering them while his good luck was active made him feel uneasy. The two men turned to each other and smiled smugly. Ha ha ha, it's definitely going to be that way. Castle looked at him and asked, what do you think, Master? He blushed and smiled awkwardly without answering, making Castle ask, what's wrong with you, Master? Kai also noticed and said, your nose is all red. Are you hurt somewhere? Castle was startled and said, is it because of those goblins just now? An bellowed, they're fine. Let's go back. When they pushed open the door and entered the house, they saw Chris lying on the ground with a pale face. When she saw everyone enter, she sat up and said, I'm glad you're back. Seeing her look tired, An said, you can lie down again, we're back now. How's the preparation going? When reminded of it, her face turned even paler, and she started to smoke. I haven't finished yet. An was frightened and said, I understand, sorry. She raised one finger and explained, normally crafting this item is easy. But her face turned red with anger. I've failed 5 times, 3 times in a row. She sighed tiredly. I'm just lying down to calm my head. An smiled and said, bad luck, huh? After saying this, his face also turned pale green. Bad luck, maybe it's not because of that luck of mine, he thought anxiously. Just then the voices of those guys echoed. Could it be because of the owner's luck? The 3 men standing behind him turned to each other and talked. Chris asked in surprise. Could it be because of Master's good luck? An looked guilty and was caught. He stood up and gestured, telling Chris about it. Chris listened and sighed. I don't understand what you're talking about. I'm the one who failed to craft it. You smiled and listened happily, saying that if you failed, it was partly due to your master's bad luck. Then it wouldn't be so bad. Listening to this, he burst out laughing and replied, that's just like Chris. After talking to them, Chris became disheartened and went back to her room. I'm calm now, so I'll go back to work. An called out to her. Chris, aren't you going to tell us what you're crafting? Chris turned back and replied sadly, it's still a secret, but I promise you'll be pleased with it, Master. You can have high expectations. After saying that, she slammed the door shut. An folded his arms and glanced at the 2 men who nodded in understanding. The 3 of them immediately stood together listening at the door. Suddenly the door opened and Chris's cold voice said, you people must be very bored, huh? Her eyes were red and intimidating, making the 3 eavesdroppers shiver. Instead of sneaking around, they should be conquering the dungeon. They stuttered, why, yes, sorry to disturb you. Chris slammed the door shut again. The 3 of them were still shaking with fear. Kai poured coffee into a cup and put it on a tray. Then he brought it to Kim Hyunbok, who was sitting on a chair looking a bit anxious, thinking, hasn't Chris been in there for too long? Sky handed Kim Hyunbok a cup of coffee and said, it's been 3 days since she went in there. I guess things aren't going smoothly, huh? I wonder if we can help her. Kai also frowned immediately at the result. Did you forget that the last time you secretly looked at the whole group, you were given a cold glance as sharp as a knife? How can I help you? Kai smiled and said, I think Miss Chris will be happier if you trust her, and continue waiting for her. An agreed, sipping his coffee. You're right. Chris is smart. She'll be fine. Just then Chris came out, and the atmosphere in the room became gloomy and intimidating. An was startled and spilled coffee on the other 2, who felt a chill run down their spines. Chris's voice was dark and ominous. Were you talking about me? Kai quickly handed An some paper to wipe his face, and An asked Chris, are you done? Chris lowered her head and said, You just asked me to finish it, didn't you? Then she suddenly looked up, smiling brightly. Yes, I've finally finished. She held up a card, and An asked in surprise, Is that the finished product? Chris held up the card. Yes, this is called a magic card. An didn't understand and asked, What is a magic card? Chris explained simply put, it's a card with a magic formation engraved on it. After you infuse it with mana, imagine, and chant the spell, anyone can use magic. Chris handed it to An. It also reduces the casting time of magic and allows you to use magic 2 levels above your current level. An took it to try it out. An looked at the card and couldn't help but exclaim, Impressive, Chris told him. Actually, in my world, magic books are the standard. Magic cards are too small and hard to craft, so I didn't use them much before. You drew all these cards yourself? He asked in amazement. It must have taken a lot of concentration, she replied honestly. Mostly it was thanks to the accuracy of the technology in this world. I could freely adjust the size and fit it all in one go, she added. She spread out several cards in her hands, showing them off, and said I could print out as many copies as I wanted. He saw this and asked, So what was it that you failed to craft last time? You got angry when I reminded you. She explained to him. The process of crafting a magic card involves converting a regular magic formation print into a card adding mana crystal dust, and then it becomes a magic card, he asked. So it still requires some manual steps. She smiled and said, Yes, but it's not too labor-intensive because the printing machine handles the most difficult part. She spread out the deck of cards on the table. I was able to create a total of 20 cards. 14 level 1 cards and 6 level 2 cards divided evenly between me and my master. Actually, at first, I wanted to create at least 40 cards. He looked at the deck of cards and asked, Why did you only create a few low-level magic cards? Wouldn't higher-level cards be better? The other 2 also looked on intently, listening to her explanation. It's because the mana consumption is different. Okay? The higher the level of the magic spell, the more mana you need to use. It's not that I'm not skilled enough. Castle suddenly slammed his hand on the table and said, Hey magician, you're not giving us anything. She looked at them and comforted. Unfortunately, I don't have enough materials to craft more cards. Instead, I'll create some necessary equipment for the both of you. The 2 cheered upon hearing this. They cheered. Awesome too. Exciting. Several people sitting around the table looked at her, smiled and said, Now we have to level up to the highest level possible to pass the first gate. She put away the cards and replied, All right, now my level is definitely the lowest among us. When the final count was made, they were all thrilled and shouted, I can go right now. The host Kai agreed, and I also nodded in agreement. I see that everyone has agreed, he said. So, what are we waiting for? Let's battle. Finally, the day arrived when they returned to the gate. It had been 16 days. Now we're at the same level as the person who posted on the forum about this gate, he said. And everyone had reached level 12. This time they were fully equipped and the magic cards were ready, neatly stored in the pouch at his waist. His face was beaded with sweat as he said seriously, We've prepared a lot, so let's give it our all. Especially since your role is crucial. I trust you. Trust. Kai, filled with confidence, shouldered his sword and said, I'll repay your trust with a victorious joy. The group chimed in. Let's do this. Then he opened the gate. Castle and Chris stood behind him ready with their weapons. The inside of the cave was dimly lit with many pillars around. There were also many goblins inside. When they saw him enter, they cried out in surprise. Gah, gah! One that seemed to be the leader had its eyes glow, and it shouted loudly. The other goblins, upon seeing this, charged forward. They rushed out from all directions surrounding the group. All of them were armed with clubs, and he thought, There are more goblins than we expected. Castle shouted, If it were just the 4 of us, we'd be dead for sure. Kai pointed his sword at the goblins in front, commanding the tamed goblins to attack. They immediately charged. The 2 groups of goblins clashed. Kim Hyunbok held up a card and shouted. Chris quickly took a card and together they shouted Fireball. Hundreds of fireballs shot out from their cards. They flew swiftly like arrows. They exploded upon hitting the goblins. The goblins fell dead in droves. Kai shouted, Miss Chris and the Master are supporting us. He ordered the goblins to defeat all enemies and protect the 2. The goblin army charged ferociously. Seeing their fierce battle, he smiled in satisfaction. Giving Kai the command position was the right decision. Castle fought with all his might, shouting as he swung his sword. "Kill them!" He fought frenziedly. The more he fought, the more he wanted to kill. Suddenly he was startled, his eyes lighting up as he looked in that direction. A goblin was thrown at him. Luckily, he raised his sword in time to block it. This goblin was bigger and stronger than the others, and it was armed. Castle looked at it with excitement. "Finally, you're making a move." Without hesitation, Castle charged forward, sword in hand. "I'll be the one to finish it off." The two clashed. They were evenly matched. Castle's body shook slightly as he looked at the goblin wielding its sword. He shouted, "Damn it, if only I had armor!" Kim Hyunbok heard his cry and shouted back, "If we survive, I'll definitely buy you armor." Castle's enthusiasm was reignited. "You'd better keep that promise." The two continued to fight. Castle shouted, finishing blow, and he responded. "Got it!" Chris and he quickly took out a lightning card and pointed it at the goblin. A lightning bolt immediately struck two people, but only the goblins died. He laughed loudly. It seemed that this undead body was quite useful. He held tightly onto the goblin's shoulder. His two eyes gleamed with malice. "Where are you running to?" Then he took out his sword and stabbed, finishing it off. Finally, he won. Castle raised his sword, cheering and shouting, "Ha ha ha, we won!" Kai also came from behind. "Good job! Let's keep going and finish off the rest." He also charged into the fight. "We're almost done, just a little more." Everyone. Chris was also fighting, not allowing herself to be distracted until the very end. Castle grabbed his sword again. "I couldn't just stand by and watch, could I?" After a while of frantic fighting, Kim Hyunbok lay on the ground panting. "We won." He clenched his fists, his face red with excitement, and raised them in joy. "We won." The three skulls were focused on absorbing mana. Everyone seemed very pleased. Castle said, "Just as expected, the boss is on a completely different level." Kai also smiled. "I didn't expect the three of us to be able to absorb so much." Chris replied, "I'm sure I can create a 3-circle spell card now." He lay on the ground resting. "That's amazing." He thought he was too tired, so he lay down to rest for a bit, then leaned back, satisfied, and closed his eyes. But he suddenly felt that something was off. When he opened his eyes, he was met with the sight of a goblin's head, covered in blood, with its tongue hanging out dead. He was startled and shouted, "Ah!" and quickly backed away several meters. The other three were shocked and rushed over. "What's wrong, Lord?" he stuttered. "I'm fine." Looking around, the area was littered with goblin corpses. He felt it was crazy to try to sleep in such a place. Kim Hyunbok took out his phone. "We're done here. Let's head back. It's been a while." On the phone, information from the forum appeared. He read it and asked, "Was there something like this before?" The others gathered around to look. Chris also peeked in. "It seems like this is a new feature." He guessed, maybe this is a reward for killing the boss. He pressed on the phone to search. "Let's see. It doesn't seem too dangerous." As soon as he finished pressing, a door appeared in front of them. Chris exclaimed in surprise. "This is..." He curiously looked at it. "A door appearing right in front of us is extremely convenient, isn't it?" Before he could do anything, Chris had already rushed forward. He was sweating, watching her move quickly like lightning. Curiously looking at the door, he was stunned, watching her whole body tremble uncontrollably as she reached out to touch the door. Shouting, "This is ridiculous!" she stood there muttering, "Spatial materialization, or both." He was confused, calling out to Chris. Castle quickly stopped him. "Let it be, Master. Sorcerers become crazy because of magic and related things." Kai also sighed. "It's better not to disturb a sorcerer in such a state." "None of you dare to call her!" he shouted. "When will we go back home?" Castle still prevented him. "Not now," he asked impatiently. "Do we have to wait here?" The others were worried and discussed. Kai said, "Since she's like this, it's better to wait." Castle agreed, yes. Otherwise, the consequences will be unpleasant. Seeing this, he sat down on a rock, helpless, and sighed. No other choice. The three of them sat far away, waiting for Chris to satisfy her curiosity. Finally, they returned home. He lay on the ground, his eyes dark from lack of sleep. Suddenly the doorbell rang. He opened his eyes abruptly. What the fuck? Did Chris buy something from the dungeon for him? Castle looked at him. You're finally awake. But Chris denied it. No, I didn't buy anything. Kai looked outside. I'll go check. A moment later, he brought in a cardboard box. It seemed someone had sent them a package. The others gathered around the box. Chris said, it's too big. Castle also warned you should be careful when receiving items from unknown people. He read the sender's name on the box. If it's this person, it's fine. The Sorcerer President. He took out a knife to open the box. The others curiously looked inside. Inside the box was a set of clothes and a letter. Congratulations on your achievement on the forum. I'm glad to see that the person I helped has written a top-ranked post. He held the letter and read on. Moreover, I was impressed by your thorough and steady approach to clearing the dungeon. The other two were examining the clothes, finding it had special features and was very expensive. He continued reading the letter. However, exploring the dungeon alone is very difficult and dangerous. That's why I'm sending this equipment to help you a bit. The other two also discovered that the clothes had special features and were very expensive. The letter said, I truly hope we can meet in person someday. He sat cross-legged on the ground. Castle also held up the clothes, trying them on him. He held the clothes, feeling happy and embarrassed. Thank you very much. Chris astutely said it would be even better if you received it before facing the boss. He also felt it made sense. Yes, that's true. He remembered that the other person had also given him books last time. He always received help later, so he wondered if there was a way to repay that support. Chris thought for a moment. Do you want to repay the support? He replied, yes, because he helped me when I was in the most difficult situation. He read the information on his phone where someone was selling the clothes at a very high price. It seemed the person wasn't lacking money. He wondered what would be a good gift for him. Chris thought of something. How about a spell card? He thought it was a good idea and asked, is a spell card okay? She confidently said, later I also plan to sell them. Based on the nickname, it seems that he is also a sorcerer. So the charm card is a meaningful gift. Moreover, it's a good learning opportunity for you, Master. He turned pale at the mention of having to study. She continued to talk at length. Now you need to learn the first magic circle and formation. You are also a sorcerer master. He almost fainted when he heard her say that, moreover, it will be more meaningful if it's a gift made by you and sent by you. So let's start immediately, right? The other two stood by watching the scene unfold and really felt like they were setting Kim Hyunbok up to study. He immediately objected, shouting, I've just returned from the dungeon. I need to rest for at least a day. She wouldn't budge, replying. For a sorcerer, researching and practicing is also a form of rest, saying that she dragged him into the room immediately. All right, let's begin the special training until you can create one. The two skulls stood still, not daring to say a word, as they watched with sweat, looking frightened. No one could save Kim Hyunbok. At this moment in an office, a man named Mark opened the door and entered. Mr. President. I'm here, he said. The old man looked up and saw him. You've entered already, didn't you? I told you to knock before entering, Mark. He was taken aback, scratching his head. I apologize, I completely forgot. Is there something good? The old man smiled. Of course something good. The old man turned his chair to face another direction. Do you remember the young man from last time, the one who was the last member in the dungeon? He is still alive and continues to challenge the dungeon, so I've sent him a set of armor via email. Mark was surprised. What's that? Why did you send something so expensive? The old man replied. Just like I said last time, I don't regret it. Take a look at the screen for a moment. Mark quickly pulled the computer towards him, full of curiosity. After reading the text on the screen, he asked, Isn't this the top post on the Tips and Tricks bulletin board? The old man replied, Yes, it was written by that young man himself. Mark was surprised. Who would have thought that there are people who operate in such a mysterious way? The old man chuckled with delight. With this, it's simple. We can't stop supporting that young man. The old man was full of hope. I really have high hopes for this young man. Kim Hyunbok sighed deeply. He and his companions were standing in front of the open dungeon door. Several of them enthusiastically shouted, Let's go to the second floor. He walked very cautiously. The burning torches lit up the area. Kim Hyunbok's group cautiously entered. Castle, holding a sword, led the way, accompanied by several tamed goblins. He raised the torch to examine the surroundings, feeling that this place wasn't much different from the first floor. Chris immediately turned around to remind him. But the monsters here will have higher levels. Being careless will get you killed. He broke out in a cold sweat, smiling wryly. I wasn't being careless. Just then a noise was heard. Before them stood a group of goblins, armed and blocking their path. Several of them shouted, "It appeared right after you mentioned it." The largest goblin, the leader, opened its mouth, revealing sharp teeth. He shouted, and Orc Kai immediately responded, "Roger that." Then he and Castle immediately drew their swords and charged into battle against the goblins. He watched the scene, his eyes wide with shock, exclaiming, "Ridiculous." Looking at the goblins, he couldn't believe that the goblins they had upgraded were being overwhelmed. A club suddenly swung towards him. Castle quickly raised his sword to block it. The goblin seemed very strong, but Castle knocked it back. Seeing that the orc was twice his size, Castle couldn't help but be surprised. Not bad for an orc, really strong. Not just one, but another orc appeared behind it, leading another group of goblins. He felt a bit anxious, shouting, "Another group is appearing?" Chris stepped forward calmly, reassuring him. "Don't worry." Then she shouted from a distance, "Kaslakai. When I give the signal, retreat immediately." The two immediately responded, "Roger that." She took out a charm from her pocket. She held it close to him. "Lend me a bit of your mana." Immediately his mana flowed out, wrapping around the charm. The mana emanated more and more, illuminating the area with a blue glow, and the charm also lit up. He broke out in a cold sweat, shocked, feeling the change in his body as his mana was being drained. Chris's eyes lit up as she gave the order. "Kasla Kai, retreat." The two quickly jumped away, clearing the way for Chris. Chris raised the charm high immediately, creating a huge fireball. She waved the charm once. The fire immediately flew towards the goblins. The orc's eyes were fixed on the approaching flames, unable to resist. Castle shouted, "Oh no!" The fire hit them and exploded like a bomb. He watched the scene, delighted. Amazing, the third-rank magic circle is really top-notch. He turned to look at Chris, his eyes shining with excitement. "You're really amazing, Chris, taking care of all the monsters in one go." But to his surprise, Chris was lying flat on the ground, unable to stand up, her bones scattered everywhere. He was shocked, his eyes wide with alarm. She quickly reassured him, "I'm fine, master." He shouted, "Ah!" He quickly knelt down beside her. She said, "I'm just a bit exhausted." "Because I'm a skeleton." I collapsed like that. It's interesting, isn't it? Now he finally breathed a sigh of relief. "You scared me to death. I almost had a heart attack." At this moment, Kai lifted Castle up and walked out of the fire. Castle's feet were already burned off, and he was furious, scolding Chris. "You almost killed me. You know that, right?" If Kai hadn't lost his legs, he would have reminded Castle not to struggle anymore. "Castle, let's retreat." He turned around to look at Castle and the other two, and it seemed like something wasn't quite right. With 2 out of their 4 members incapacitated, they couldn't fight back. He decided it was too dangerous to continue and suggested they retreat. The most troublesome part was that one side had to carry Castle, who had lost his legs, while the other side had to pick up Chris. She even reminded them to be gentle with the fragile items. Kai had to ask Castle to help pick up the items while he activated the return function, making their group the most miserable one ever. When they got back home, he had to use mana to reconnect the bones of the 2 skeletons. Finally, after finishing the task, he collapsed onto the ground, sighing. Now that Chris was fine, it was his turn to be drained of mana. "Are you okay, Kasla?" Before Castle could respond, Chris spoke up first. "I'm fine. After a while, the bones of skeletons will recover on their own. In an emergency, we can even replace them with bones from others." Upon hearing this, Castle got angry and started arguing. "You're not the one who lost the leg, so you can say that so easily. It's all because of you. You should apologize to me, not the other way around." Chris tried to calm him down. "Apologizing? All right, I'm sorry. I'll be more careful next time." Castle shouted back. What kind of apology is that? You're just pretending to be innocent, aren't you? Kim Hyunbok had to intervene, stopping their argument. Everyone is safe. That's all that matters. We've lost all the goblins, though, Kai said gloomily. The people around this table started discussing. He asked Chris, "By the way, how did you manage to cast that fireball?" "Don't tell me you prepared it in advance," Chris replied honestly. "I did prepare it in advance, just in case something unexpected happened." He narrowed his eyes, looking at Chris. "You're saying that something unexpected happened?" Chris opened her eyes wide, looking innocent. Sometimes sorcerers can get a bit agitated even if they're usually very rational. He smiled, teasing her. Agitated. That doesn't quite fit you, Chris. You're usually very rational. Chris narrowed her eyes, recalling something. That's not true. I lost my rationality once before when I saw that door. You should remember that. You guys had to wait for me to calm down. He turned to Kai and asked, "What do you think about the monsters on the second floor?" Kai replied, "The goblins were a bit stronger, but they're still no match for our warriors." Castle added, "The orcs are also bigger and stronger, but they're still nothing compared to our warriors. As long as we're careful and don't get surrounded." He said if we start the battle with magic, it will be much easier. Castle suggested, "I understand now, Lord. Please buy us some equipment." He leaned on his hand, looking at Castle. "You said you didn't need that kind of thing before," but Castle raised his hand to argue. "I wasn't used to this body back then. Now I'm more comfortable, but after losing my legs, my thoughts have changed." Kai suddenly thought of something and said, "There's another reason, Lord." He was surprised. Another reason? Kai explained that it was because of their weight. "We're just skeletons, so we don't have much weight, and we can't resist any destructive force. That's why we need equipment to increase our weight." He found it interesting. "I didn't know that. Weight, huh?" Castle got excited, saying, "With equipment, I can even punch those orcs in the face with one hand. Ha ha ha!" But Chris interrupted, "Instead of using equipment, we can create a nucleus." He was surprised. A nucleus. He rubbed his chin, not understanding. "What is that?" As soon as he asked, Chris's face turned cold, and she glared at him. "I taught you this before, but it seems like someone was too lazy to study. I'll have to be stricter with you from now on." He was terrified, sweating. "Please don't make me absorb so much knowledge in such a short time. It's too hard." Chris began to explain in a professorial tone. "I'll explain it again. A nucleus is something commonly found in undead creatures. It's like a heart. No matter how strong an undead is, if its nucleus is destroyed, it will die." But he still didn't understand, scratching his head. "So we can create one that sounds like a weakness to me. Why would we do that?" Chris got annoyed, narrowing her eyes. "It seems like you don't remember anything." He immediately fell silent, not daring to say another word. "It's not good to show off your ignorance." She began to explain in more detail. "Undead monsters are big and resilient like zombies. Even if they lose their entire body and are left with just their head, they can still survive. They're monsters that don't feel pain or fatigue, making them hard to deal with. However, they have a weakness: their nucleus. The nucleus is a beautiful bluish-purple color, like a gemstone." She pointed to her left chest. "That's why when facing undead, you need to aim for the spot where the nucleus is located, usually around the head or left chest." He asked another question. "But the undead I've encountered before didn't have a nucleus. I thought they were just skeletons." Chris replied, "Recently high-level undead don't have a nucleus. The nucleus needs time to form and accumulate experience. Not all undead have a nucleus, especially those that are not old enough or haven't been cultivated properly." Chris said I was going to observe and learn more about it, but after today, I've changed my mind. Kai also chimed in. "To explore deeper into the dungeon, we need to upgrade our strength." He folded his arms, standing in front of the others. "So creating a nucleus is just creating a weakness, according to what you said." Chris had to explain further. Having a nucleus has more benefits than drawbacks. With a nucleus, you can use magic circles and aura spheres. He was stunned, as if struck by lightning, and asked why those things were so important to swordsmen and sorcerers. that she could use magic all the time without needing a magic circle. She replied that up until now she had stored a certain amount in her bones, but this method wasn't very effective. Chris looked at him, and now she was asking everyone for their opinions to create a nucleus. He leaned on his hand, thinking, "All right, if it's that beneficial, let's do it." With unanimous agreement, all three skeletons enthusiastically cheered. He smiled happily and said, "Let's get started then." Chris quickly raised her hands, crossing them to stop him. "No, we can't do it right now." She said that the nucleus had to be made from materials that could absorb mana, such as special minerals, the heart of a monster, or gems. Among those options, they could only use gems. Upon hearing this, he trembled and stuttered, "Gee, gems." She nodded. "Yes, gems. The purer they are, the higher their absorption capacity." He broke into a sweat and remained silent for a moment before daring to ask, "How much money do I have now?" Chris raised her finger and said, "If we don't count the real money, it's less than 30,000. 30,000 isn't a small amount, is it? Is 30,000 enough to buy a suitable gem?" "No," she replied. "According to my research, the current price of a 1-carat diamond is $1,000. He was still filled with doubts. "How many carats does the nucleus need?" She furrowed her brow. "The minimum diameter is 5 centimeters, and 1 carat is 6.2 millimeters." Hearing this, he almost fainted. "Is there any other way?" She smiled brightly, raised 2 thumbs up, and confidently said, "Yes, there is. Just wait a little." Then she ran into the room as if flying. A moment later, she came out carrying a business plan notebook. She was also wearing glasses, looking very professional. She began to present her plan. "May I proceed with the presentation?" The other 3 sat down, looking at her in surprise, and asked, "When did you prepare all this?" She began to explain that the necessary material for creating the nucleus was gems, but gems were extremely expensive. She slammed her hand on the table, confidently asserting, "However, there's no need to worry because our company has launched a highly profitable product." He was amused and exclaimed. She pointed to the magic cards. "That product is the magic cards. If we sell magic cards, we'll earn a huge profit, more than enough to buy gems." She painted a rosy, desirable future. Buyers can use magic cards as trump cards. It's a win-win situation. Needless to say, magic is the decisive factor in life and death. She showed the price list for mana crystal dust. "If anyone is concerned about production costs, don't worry about it." He was increasingly surprised, his mouth agape. "We just need to utilize mana dust reasonably. With 1 kilogram, we can produce 1,000 magic cards." He exclaimed, "What?" Chris continued. "Taking into account the risk of failure and labor costs, the selling price of magic cards on the market will be $3,000. The details are written in this contract. Please review and sign below. Success is within our grasp." He was impressed, his eyes shining as he took the contract she offered. "Do I just need to sign here?" "Yes, here." Even Kazel recognized the situation, saying, "It seems the Lord is being led by the nose." Kai also ran out of words. "I guess it's not that bad. Still, we should read it carefully before signing." He wasn't very alert. Just as he was about to sign with the pen, a thought suddenly struck him. "Won't it be too expensive if we sell it at this price? What if no one buys it?" Kazel turned to him and replied, "To preserve our lives, the cost doesn't matter." He bit the pen, looking naive. "Oh right, I was too naive." After finishing, he returned the contract to Chris. She said, "Adventurers in the dungeon make profits based on risk." "Are you done signing?" He replied, "Yes, I'm done." She reviewed the contract once more. He then asked, "So how are we going to sell them on the dungeon website?" It seemed she had anticipated everything, including the subsequent steps. "I've discussed it with the admin of the dungeon website. After I praised the benefits of magic cards, they agreed immediately. They even offered to pin our sales post." Upon hearing this, he was very satisfied. Stood up and said to the other 2, "What are we waiting for? Let's do it." Kai also said, "The second floor is very dangerous. Continuing to adventure in our current state is too much for us, but we shouldn't slack off in our combat training either, lest we get rusty." He agreed. "That makes sense. So let's try to fight at least once every time we go down into the dungeon. Let's try not to overexert ourselves." His hands were typing away on the keyboard. The people surrounding the computer watched him with smiles. They had posted the sales ad for the cards on the group. Now it was time to get rich. A pile of labels and stickers was on the floor. He lay on the ground, his arms and legs spread out, looking exhausted. The area was littered with paper scraps and packaging labels indicating they had just finished packaging. He sighed deeply. His eyes were dark and sunken, and he looked like he was about to die. Kai brought him a cup of water. "Lord, you must be tired. Have some honey water." Kai was very concerned about him. Castle, who was packing the boxes, said in surprise, "Who would have thought that we'd sell out in just 5 minutes?" He held the cup of water, smiling wearily but happily. Seeing the account balance had exceeded 400,000, he was so shocked that he almost had a heart attack. Just then Chris came out and patted him on the back, laughing. "Haha, Lord, you're so timid. This is just pocket change. We can use it to buy the materials for the nucleus. Let's go shopping." He put down the cup and replied, "Let's get started right away." He looked at her with hidden intentions, begging her to understand, and finally said, "Can I take a day to recuperate? I'm really going to die, aren't I?" She couldn't help but sigh and agree. "Fine. We can clean the house for 1 day. That's it. You really are a slave to your work." The next day, a gemstone was already in Castle's left chest. He said with delight, "Damn, having a new core is wonderful. I can feel the mana flowing abundantly in my body." Kai also looked down at my hand and felt like he was reborn. Chris also had something similar in her chest, so using the third magic circle wouldn't be a problem anymore. He looked at the three of them in surprise and asked, "Does it really make that much of a difference? You don't look any different." The girl tried to stifle a laugh and replied, "I think it's because we spent a lot of money, but there's no noticeable difference." He said in a deep voice, "It cost us 1.6 million. Talking about the gemstone, she said on the positive side, using artificial gemstones instead of natural ones helps reduce costs a bit. We can even order the exact size we need." He asked, "But didn't you say that their mana capacity is only 70% compared to natural gemstones?" She opened her chest and showed him several gemstones inside her left chest. She said, "That's why I put 5 of them in my body. I took quantity over quality. Since I created it, it can later resonate with the central core. Once I attach the central core, it will become even stronger." He smiled and said, "It seems you have a plan already. Can you all line up here? I want to check your stats." Upon hearing that they all lined up and joked, "Don't be shocked when you see our progress. Chris said I'd like it if you checked me first." He started checking Chris's stats first. Her stats had changed. Her strength had increased to 16 out of 42. Castle also showed positive changes. Kai's strength also increased significantly. He looked at the data and was slightly surprised. His eyes lit up as he saw some new data related to magical strength. He raised his device for the three of them to gather around and look. "Let's check," he said with a smile. Chris looked at the data and said, "It seems to be calculated separately from talent. This could be a good thing, but as long as the core is still healthy, other changes can still occur, so we should check the stats daily to prepare for the future." He said happily, "All right, with the increase in your magical strength, raiding the dungeon will be easier." Upon hearing about raiding the dungeon, Castle became excited and rolled up his sleeves. "Then let's not stand here anymore and start the battle." But Chris's fiery enthusiasm was immediately dampened by Chris, whose eyes turned red as she scolded him. "No, the first thing we need to ensure is that the core is properly attached, and that using mana isn't a problem. You'll be responsible if our master dies due to unexpected issues." Castle immediately broke out in a cold sweat and stuttered, "Okay, I'll practice at home first." "Okay, let's go into the dungeon later," Castle said, still full of enthusiasm. "Wait a minute, I'll show you the amazing skills of Castle." Then he immediately drew his sword and swung it. In the corridor, his sword glowed as he killed a goblin, and then he looked at him proudly. "See, Master, this is called Aura Sword. You need to reach the level of an A-rank mercenary to use it," he added. He nodded in praise. "That's impressive." Kai also began to show off drawing his sword. No matter what a skilled swordsman can do, anything, he said with a smile. As a goblin ran towards him, he drew his sword and said, "I'll show you something even more impressive." Kai stood far away and swung his sword several times, releasing sword beams that flew far, and hit distant enemies. He watched in admiration. Kai, you've been using Aura Sword continuously. I didn't expect that. Kai grinned, pleased with himself. Castle, standing behind him, became jealous. Castle's eyes lit up, and he drew his sword, shouting, I can do it too. He also swung his sword repeatedly at the nearby goblins, but he felt something was off. His sword beams were just as powerful as Kai's. He turned around and looked at Castle, laughing loudly. Castle, you're amazing. Before he could finish speaking, he was shocked and screamed, staring at Castle, who was now lying on the ground, his body broken like Chris had been before. He looked at Castle, whose head was facing one direction and whose limbs were scattered elsewhere, and shouted, Castle! Castle, still conscious, replied weakly. I think I used too much mana. Recalling that before they entered the dungeon, the four of them had held hands and absorbed mana together, he said with a smile. We collected a lot before coming here, but you still used it all up. Are you sure you're okay? Kai and Chris walked over to Castle's severed head and said, Using Aura Sword for a large-scale attack usually consumes a lot of mana. Normally, you wouldn't use that much if you were just dueling. Castle overdid it. He picked up Castle's head, and Castle continued to argue. It's because I used it with this body. Before I was fine, Kai muttered. This guy is so showy. He looked at Castle's head in his hand and snorted. This is an unexpected situation. It's been a while since we last explored the dungeon. Castle apologized weakly. Chris observed the situation and finally said, I think the basic problem is that our recovery is very weak. I'll try experimenting with a mana absorption formation on the core. Kim Hyunbok heard this and suddenly became worried about his wallet. It sounds good, but let's do it later, he said. After selling the magic cards and the 2 magic circles, we're out of money again, he added. He was a little worried, but since we had already arrived, he quickly turned back before more monsters appeared. Help me lift Castle up, but Kai suddenly said, Step back, Lord. Both Kai and Chris stepped forward to protect him. Kai held his sword at the ready. I think it's too late. A giant bear appeared before them, looking ferocious and terrifying. He was startled and frightened at the sight of it, shouting, They're those damned were-hyenas! Now Castle can't fulfill his mission. The bear began to charge. It wasn't alone. A pack of were-hyenas accompanied it, all of them vicious. He looked at Chris pleadingly. What should we do? He panicked again. She raised her staff and it emitted a blue light. Please calm down, my lord, she reassured him. She raised her staff high and shouted. Lightning struck, and balls of lightning appeared surrounding her. The lightning bolts struck the were-hyenas. She smiled smugly, watching them get struck by the lightning. She slammed her staff onto the ground. Once again, like a skilled sorceress, she shouted, and a cold, icy breath froze the entire cavern. But the were-hyenas were about to get frozen solid. She quickly told Kai, and Kai immediately charged forward with his sword, killing them in one swift motion. He even charged straight at the giant bear. With one strike, he killed it. He and Castle watched in amazement. Is it over already? Was that it? Chris approached him. He was frightened and sat down on the ground. She looked serious. My lord, she said, getting close to his face. A sorcerer must always remain calm. If you panic, you won't be able to maximize your skills. The worst-case scenario is that it will get you killed. He felt ashamed and remorseful after hearing her words, bowing his head in apology. You are right. I was too careless. Castle, seeing him downhearted, shouted words of encouragement. My lord, you didn't do anything too terrible. Don't lose your spirit. Kai also approached him, comforting him. You were right. Until a few months ago, you were just an ordinary human. Chris didn't mean to scold you, she said, softening her tone. You've grown at a surprising rate, my lord. You still have shortcomings because you had to mature too quickly, but you have us, so don't worry. He felt a bit better, sighing. You're right, I have all of you by my side. He looked at the people before him, Chris, Castle, and Kai, and said, Thank you. He blushed, smiling awkwardly. Please take care of me. That night, as he prepared for bed, he opened the door, stepped into his room, and couldn't help but turn back to smile at them. You guys are always doing a great job. See you tomorrow. Kai responded cheerfully. Thanks for all your efforts, my lord. Chris also said, get a good rest. Castle gruffly wished him a good night's sleep. Good night, my lord. He pulled back the blankets and lay down on the bed, looking quite exhausted. However, it seemed he felt he had changed for the better. He closed his eyes, smiled, and thought he was tired, but not too bad. After a while, he found himself in a completely white space, with nothing in it, just him. He looked around in confusion. Where is this? He wandered around in this strange space, feeling uneasy. After looking around for a while and not seeing anything, he said to himself, I don't see anything. Walking around is fine, I suppose. He thought he was dreaming, but he felt surprisingly alert and could move around normally. Why does it have to be like this even if it's a dream, he wondered. Waiting for a while and seeing nothing change, he shrugged and sighed. It's pointless to keep walking. I'll just wait until I wake up. Suddenly, his left chest began to glow. He placed his hand on his chest, feeling it. The light emitted from his chest grew brighter. What is this mana? The blue light enveloped him. He was frightened and couldn't control it. Worrying. Is this going to be dangerous? But the mana light continued to spread, growing larger and wider. He looked down in panic, shouting, Stop it! Stop! He grasped his left chest tightly, trying to make it stop. His hand clenched tightly. He gritted his teeth, mustering all his strength. He cried out in despair, If I'm in my body, listen to me, stop it! He grasped his chest, trying to control his body. His heart beat rapidly as the mana flowed out uncontrollably. He raised his hand to cover his face, glancing down at his chest. The light from his left chest illuminated his face. Suddenly he heard voices calling out, Wake up! Wake up! My lord! My lord! Wake up! The young man opened his eyes, drenched in sweat. Before him were 3 familiar faces gathered around him. Castle exclaimed, He's awake. He's opened his eyes. Kai looked worried. Are you all right, my lord? He sat up, surprised. What's going on? Why are you all here? Castle replied. It was almost a big deal, my lord. Castle recalled I sensed an unusual wave in your room. He remembered the blue light bursting out. When I came in to check, I saw a lot of mana escaping from your body. If it had continued, you might have been in danger. He looked puzzled, raising his hand to cover his mouth. Chris asked him. Do you remember anything, my lord? He replied. In my dream, the mana flowed very quickly and strongly. Chris, did you stop it? He was surprised to hear her say that it wasn't because of anything, it just stopped suddenly. And moreover, the flow of mana was even more stable than before. He exclaimed, Oh, it's not like Chris did something. He couldn't believe it, and asked again. So you're saying it did it on its own? He fell silent, lost in thought, and suddenly his eyes changed as he furrowed his brow in surprise. He looked down at his 2 hands. Kim Hyunbak realized that there was a glowing ball of light in the palm of his hand and said softly, Light. He shouted, and immediately the light grew larger. He could control it as he wished. He understood now. I get it now. This kind of mana has always existed in my body, and I can control it. He clenched his fists and both hands lit up. The mana in his body surged out like a company controlling its employees. Chris was also stunned, watching the flow of light and mana in his body. He saw it stabilize and radiate outward as he controlled it, illuminating everything around him. Then he withdrew it back into himself, and it stopped emitting light. Chris said with a smile, Congratulations, Master. You've become a true magician. I didn't expect you to be able to pass the 2nd magic circle test on your first try and reach the 3rd magic circle. He was taken aback, exclaiming, 3rd level me. Castle was overjoyed, congratulating him, and Kai also applauded, saying, Indeed, our master is worthy of respect. The 3 of them were all happy, and he laughed loudly, thanking them. He could feel his heart beating in his chest and the stable flow of mana surrounding it. He still couldn't believe it. Is this really happening? How did I reach the 3rd magic circle in just 1 try? Chris told him that magic is a discipline heavily influenced by one's mind and enlightenment, as she had mentioned before. He furrowed his brow, not understanding what enlightenment meant, finding it too grand a concept. She helped him imagine it by comparing it to climbing a ladder and reaching a higher position. Enlightenment doesn't have to be something grand. It's just like realizing your own potential to move to a higher level. After climbing, you put the ladder away. Of course, everyone's understanding of enlightenment is different. and the realizations you have during your growth may not be valuable to others. She smiled. However, magician families still share their enlightenment with each other, even if it may not be useful. Naturally, I will do the same. Her eyes sparkled as she grasped his hand. Please share your enlightenment with me, Master. He was taken aback, sweating, and hesitantly agreed. Okay, but can I eat first? She pondered, touching her chin. It's a combination of profession and ability blessed by mana, making them operate. And this is like completing a magic spell no longer under our control. It's surprising. She looked at him, slumped over the table, and teased. I understand this a bit now. It has a weakness. Using high-level magic consumes a lot of energy, while using low-level magic consumes less. It's very suitable for fighting against magicians of the same level. What a joke. He was tired, but quite satisfied, happy that he now knew how to use it. She agreed. Yes, it's very useful. So from now on, you must study magic at any time. Owen. He was taken aback upon hearing this, feeling like he was petrified. Studying magic is so draining. Why is that? She replied that his ability would be maximized if he learned more magic. The more he listened, the more he felt like logging out of his body. She immediately acted, pulling him up. So today will be a special lesson. She dragged him into the room, ignoring his pleas for help. Castle and Kai were sweating, knowing what was coming. There's no time to delay. Let's go. A fireball exploded in front of him, shattering into smoke and flames. A blue light flashed by quickly. Kim Hyunbok held his staff, shouting. Castle, standing behind him, said to Kai, "He looks stressed. It's pitiful." Kai couldn't say a word, looking at their master. Kim Hyunbok looked exhausted with dark circles under his eyes. He sighed, feeling the pressure ease. Indeed, humans need to move around. Castle, carrying his sword, praised him. Your actual combat ability has improved a lot, Master. Chris also told him to take it easy and return home. He was surprised, asking. Already, Chris added, you still have to study when you get home. Don't overexert yourself or it won't be good. He felt disheartened hearing this. After returning home, he took a bath, washed his hair, and cleaned himself. As soon as he entered the living room, he saw the three of them waiting for him. You're out, Master, Castle said. What's the matter, he asked. Castle replied, Please check our information. He took out his device and checked. It wasn't difficult. He widened his eyes in surprise. He looked at the three of them, each with a different race or class. Castle was a warrior, Kai was an assassin, and Chris was a magician. He exclaimed, You've changed your race or class. He checked the details of each of them. Chris asked if there was anything else. He replied that their level limits and ability thresholds had increased, but their skills remained the same. Chris calmly said, as predicted. He was surprised you all knew about this. Castle said, Of course we knew. We could see the changes from the outside. The two of them walked over to measure their height against his. They were now taller than him. Now you know what changed, he exclaimed. Looking at the two skulls in front of him, who were now significantly taller, he sweated, exclaiming, When did you grow so tall? They replied that they were still changing. But their bones had become harder and larger. He panicked, turning to Chris. Is Chris the same? The woman honestly said, I also felt the change, but it was an internal change, so it wasn't very noticeable on the outside. You seem a bit more relaxed, he said, sitting down and smiling. Chris hasn't grown taller yet, but why does he seem so different? You're also changing, Master. He pointed to his own face and asked, What do you mean? Recalling that night, she explained Master was able to create a third-level magic circle, which affected us. He understood now. So if I grow stronger, everyone else will too. She nodded in agreement. It's very likely. Kai spoke up. I think you'll understand what it's like after the development process is complete, but it's clear that when Master gets stronger, we get stronger too. It'll make exploring the dungeon much smoother in the future. The people around the table chatted. Kim Hyunbok said, Since we're getting close, Chris, now that I've learned some basic spells, shouldn't we start attacking the dungeon? But she didn't agree. We still need to wait a bit longer. He looked anxious. Is it still a long way off? She thought it was because they were weak, but it wasn't. "You're now a great mage, capable of going anywhere," she said. Hearing this, his eyes lit up with excitement. The feeling of progress was exhilarating. She looked at the two of them and announced, "However, the new equipment will be ready next week." Castle was overjoyed. "Finally, our equipment is being made," Kai smiled. "That's good news." She turned to them. "The production time is short because we just need to apply the spell to them, so let's start next week. Before that, let's focus on training our magic." He looked serious again. A week later, a skull exhaled smoke, trembling just as she had said. It was Castle, looking extremely happy. He was wearing armor with one hand on his hip and the other clenched into a fist. "We're finally equipped," he exclaimed, striking a pose. His eyes shone brightly. "From now on, it won't be like before." Chris explained them the new iron armor would increase their strength through an enhancement spell. He immediately thought of fighting a goblin, but he wouldn't be afraid. "It's like swatting a mosquito," he laughed. She continued, "The speed will also increase with an acceleration spell, allowing him to run faster. Not only that, but the armor also had an auto-recovery function and adjustable weight due to a lightning spell and auto-recovery spell. The sword in his hand was also enchanted with spells like sharpness enhancement and auto-recovery. The two of them, one in armor and the other with a sword, grinned foolishly at each other, both looking pleased. Seeing them happy, he couldn't help but smile. "Everyone looks happy," she said, turning to him. "Master should also get one." He blushed, looking pleased. "Really?" she replied. "Of course, Master. Try it on." Chris, like a caring manager, handed him a long coat. He put it on, but it wasn't armor. It was a coat. She explained that the coat had enhancement auto-recovery and lightning spells. The pockets were also enchanted to expand space, making it easier to carry items. Castle immediately ran over and stuck his hand into the pocket. He dug his hand deep into the pocket, playing around. "Wow, this is amazing," he said. She smiled. "It did cost a bit, but it's worth it for the dungeon." Castle and Kai started putting various items into the pocket. "It seems we can use it for a long time," Kai said, urging Castle to put more in. Castle, not knowing any better, continued to stuff the pocket with random items, including a stuffed animal. Chris watched them with her arms crossed, thinking that no matter how good the equipment was, it was still consumable. If they encountered stronger monsters, the equipment would be used up faster. She looked at him. "But if it lasts longer, that's better." "Who knows what'll happen in the future?" He agreed. "If it breaks quickly, it'll just waste money, so let's take care of it." Seeing that they were ready, Castle put his hand on his shoulder. "Shall we? Let's go test our new equipment," he exclaimed, getting excited. Castle flexed his arm. "I'm ready." Kai picked up his sword. "I'm the same as Castle." The two of them were eager to fight, enjoying the thrill. Kim Hyunbok glanced at Chris. "If our equipment is ready, let's continue exploring the dungeon," he said. She smiled in agreement. To test the equipment's efficiency, let's go deeper. The four of them stood in a circle, hands outstretched. "All right, our mana is ready," Castle said loudly. "Let's do this." Suddenly, he felt something in his pocket. He pulled out a cat-shaped stuffed animal. "What's this? Why is this here?" He was annoyed. "Who put all these things in here?" Castle teased him, laughing. "There's a lot of stuff in there." The four of them walked into the dungeon. Before them appeared a group of goblin spirits. Castle saw them and exclaimed excitedly, "Finally, our prey is here." But before he could attack, a loud voice shouted. A fireball flew past Castle's face, exploding among the goblins. The goblins were burned black, lying on the ground. Not a single one survived. Castle felt like his food was snatched away from him, and he was furious. "Are you out of your mind?" he shouted at Chris. "Why are you still pretending to be innocent? You're making me angry for no reason!" He scolded, recalling the previous incident, where he had to redo things because of her interference. The two continued arguing, oblivious to a goblin that wasn't fully dead. Chris tried to justify herself. "It was an accident. How could I have measured my strength back then? And this time I only attacked first. It's completely different from last time." The argument escalated until Castle shouted, "What nonsense are you talking about?" Kim Hyunbok intervened. "Both of you stop it." Kai also advised Castle to calm down. Kim Hyunbok sighed. Don't argue in the dungeon, it's dangerous. If the monsters are still alive and call for backup, it'll be a problem. Only then did they notice that the area was empty. Kim Hyun-bok smiled wryly. It's gone. Kai also nodded in agreement. Indeed. Castle's face turned red with anger. Chris still looked innocent. I don't know what you're talking about. Kim Hyun-bok peeked out from behind the rock to take a look. Before him was a large group of goblins. The goblin that was previously injured had returned and informed the others. Kai quickly retreated behind the rock wall. He reported back to the group. It seems the monsters have regrouped, about 50 of them, Castle exclaimed. These guys are quite energetic, aren't they? Upon hearing Kai's report, Kim Hyun-bok showed no concern. Very well, let's take care of them all at once. The group then burst out of the dungeon, launching a surprise attack on the goblins. The goblins were caught off guard and panicked. Kim Hyun-bok held a staff similar to Chris's. Both of them raised their staffs and shouted. Fireball! A massive explosion ensued, engulfing several goblins in flames. The surviving goblins were shrouded in dark smoke, their glowing red eyes visible. Suddenly, a were-hyena wielding a club charged towards them. It quickly threw the club at Kim Hyun-bok. Kim Hyun-bok immediately raised his hand. He cast a psychokinesis spell, and the spears thrown by the monsters froze in midair, unable to advance further. Then he waved his hand, controlling the spears to change direction. The spears, now imbued with Kim Hyun-bok's mana, flew back towards the were-hyenas. They struck down several were-hyenas, a case of using the master's stick to hit the master. Seeing the tide turn in their favor, Kasale charged forward. Now it's my turn. He used the spikes on his armor to attack the were-hyenas, utilizing his full strength. After taking down a were-hyena, he called out to Kai. Kai understood and drew his sword. He struck the large were-hyena with a powerful blow. Together, Castle and Kai worked in perfect harmony, eliminating the monsters. The smaller goblins were terrified by the sight, realizing they were no match for the group. The goblins turned tail and fled. Chris shouted. Master Kim Hyun-bok responded, I know. He cast a spike spell and slammed his staff onto the ground. Large rocks emerged from the ground, blocking the goblins' escape route. Kim Hyun-bok declared, the exit is blocked. Chris raised her staff, casting an ice bolt spell. Icicles materialized in the air. They rained down on the goblins, killing them. Kim Hyun-bok smiled, satisfied. Good, now we just need to help Castle's side, Chris replied with a smile. Our side is done. Upon turning to Castle's side, they saw the goblins were already defeated. No need for that, Kim Hyun-bok said. Castle and Kai had also finished their task. Kai smiled. Indeed, we're done. The group converged, discussing their success. Kim Hyun-bok laughed. This time it went smoothly, luckily. Chris asked about their equipment. Castle was very satisfied, giving a thumbs up. Excellent, I'm extremely pleased with these horns on my armor. The horns were stained with the goblin's blood, and Castle was delighted. The three of them shared their experiences, laughing together. Castle felt invigorated, and Kai expressed his satisfaction with the new equipment. Suddenly, their expressions turned serious. Kai said, There's a problem. Chris also sensed it. I feel the same way. Kim Hyun-bok was puzzled. What's wrong? Chris replied. We're short on numbers. Kim Hyun-bok looked at the goblin corpses. What do you mean by numbers? Chris clarified. I mean, we don't have enough people. The three of them shared the same concern, but Kim Hyun-bok remained calm. It'll increase gradually. There's nothing special about it. Chris became serious. I have something to say, but let's talk about it when we get back. Kim Hyun-bok agreed. All right, let's head back first. The group eventually returned home. Sky and Castle gestured towards the living room. We'll wait here. This is a private matter between the teacher and student. Kim Hyun-bok looked at the two, surprised, still not grasping the gravity of the situation. Chris explained, since both my master and I are magicians, what I'm about to say is very important. He looked at her silently, not responding, and suddenly felt a bit anxious. He followed Chris into her room, and the two of them talked privately. He scratched his head and asked, So what's going on? She pointed to the bed. First, please sit down on the chair. Although it was a bed, he sat down silently. She took a chair and sat in front of him. Master, I've taught you a wide variety of magic, right? He responded, yes. She continued. Among them, is there any magic that's very easy to use? This question made him think for a moment. Well, there is. But why? Recalling his days of studying, there were times when he lay on the ground complaining about how tired he was, and whether he really needed to learn so many types of magic. At that time, she had warned him that one day, as a magician, he would have to decide on a school of magic to focus on. And until then, he needed to learn a variety of magic to have more options. Yes, you encouraged me. Now let's continue the lesson, shall we? Everything is for the success of our master, he said, not daring to be lazy, and stood up. Now thinking back, he realized that at that time, he had understood that it was because of the school of magic. She spoke in a deep tone. Yes, usually choosing a school of magic according to the teacher is very normal. But she raised her hand and said frankly, I'm not actually a formal teacher, because the skills of our master and I are different. She propped her chin and thought. If we consider it based on the skills of our master, you can choose a school of magic. Ah, no, you probably already have your own choice. He looked at her with wide eyes, a bit surprised, and said, That's right. I've made up my mind a long time ago. I've thought about it a lot, and I think it's the best direction. He slapped his thighs with both hands, put one hand on his chest, and expressed his determination. I choose the Summoner School of Magic. His eyes shone with firm resolve. And I will make a mana vow to become a true summoner. Seeing his determination, Chris began to explain the Summoner School of Magic to him, a school based on summoning, the creation of undead golems or chimeras, and the study of poison. Various experimental drugs and their attack capabilities were among the top 5 from ancient times. Due to the magical properties it used, it was considered a detestable and dangerous existence. I think making a mana vow now is still a bit early. First, you can learn a few more magic spells and then decide later. He propped his chin and looked at her. He understood what she was saying. He continued, Once I've made a mana vow, my mana properties will change based on the school of magic, as we discussed last time. Chris confirmed that's right. It makes learning the magic of that school easier. She was worried that he would have difficulty learning further. But the magic of other schools would be harder to learn, or even impossible to learn. But he didn't care. Not being able to learn other schools wasn't a problem. He was determined and didn't hesitate. Anyway, I've made up my mind. She asked curiously, Why is that? He raised 2 fingers. There are 2 reasons. He recalled his learning process and shared. First, whenever I learned about the Summoner School's magic, I felt that if I chose this, I could become stronger. You see, it's like that. And what's the second reason? When it came to the second reason, he suddenly felt embarrassed and scratched his face, finding it a bit hard to say. He looked at her and finally said, It's because of everyone, Chris Castle and Kai. He stood up. I think having you guys by my side isn't a coincidence. She listened to him silently. In the future, if I learn the summoner's magic, I might be able to help everyone. Remembering the 3 people who were always by his side, he felt that their existence would also be beneficial to him. She was a bit moved. Is it fate? You're really different from other magicians? He smiled happily. She said, People say that magicians can be impulsive sometimes. I guess this is one of those times. Seeing his determination, she didn't stop him anymore. But she warned, It will be difficult. He responded seriously, I know. She continued, You might be hated by many people, he admitted. It's true, it's tough. I'm a bit weak mentally. Although he admitted his difficulties, he didn't give up. He clenched his fist and affirmed, But I don't intend to change my decision. He stepped forward in front of her. When I regret or get tired, please help me. If I become corrupt or do something I shouldn't, please stop me. Just as he was saying this, the door to the room suddenly opened. He looked at the people with surprise and confusion. It was Castle and Kai. I knew these 2 would be eavesdropping. Castle said loudly, If our master has requested this, there's no other way. Just leave it to us. Kai also bowed politely. As a guardian deity, advising and stopping our lord is a natural duty. So please don't worry, my lord. Are you listening? Chris also put her hand on her chest and bowed. I understand master's intentions. I won't persuade him anymore. He looked at Chris in surprise. Seeing their devotion, he clenched his fist, determined. He raised his hand, feeling the mana in his left chest. All right then. His heart shone brighter, emitting a large amount of mana. he declared loudly. Kim Hyunbok, swear the mana vow. He clenched his fist. The mana shone brighter. I will walk the path of a summoner. When he shouted the vow, he felt as if he was in a different space. The surroundings were filled with purple and blue mana lights surrounding him. Castle looked at the scene in surprise, exclaiming, "Oh!" The light in his chest turned into a bright purple color. After a while, the light faded and sank into his body, ending the oath. Chris looked at him and said, "So you've become a summoner. Hopefully you'll become a successful magician in the future." He smiled and replied, "Thank you, Chris." He said, "But there are still many difficulties ahead of you." He scratched his head, looking troubled, and asked, "How can I get the magical book of the Summoner School?" He asked her, and she replied, "You don't need to worry about that. It's available for sale on the dungeon website." He was surprised. "Really?" She remembered the book and continued, "However, they're very expensive. The third-tier Magic Circle book costs as much as 2 billion. He was taken aback and asked, "Is that possible?" She covered her mouth, smiling, and said, "Maybe we can buy a second-tier magic book." Seeing her attitude made him anxious about his wallet, and he broke out in cold sweat, asking, "What's the account balance?" She looked at him and began to explain what it meant to be a master. She was like a wealthy tycoon throwing money around without checking the price. He was a bit worried and advised Chris you should use the internet less. He took a deep breath and said, "This time I'll try going alone. Please support me." The people in the dungeon were preparing to fight, and he replied, "Leave it to me." He put his hand in his pocket and rummaged through it. Then he took out a few pieces of paper and cast a spell. After that, he threw them down at the dry bones on the ground. The skeleton suddenly came to life, stood up, and formed a skeleton army. Chris looked at them in surprise and exclaimed, "That's a lot." He replied, "I can still summon more about one more batch." Kai looked at them and said, "To be strong, we need to rely on summoning." He asked seriously, "I'm sure they're not on the same level as the ones on the first floor, right?" He saw a group of ghostly dogs holding sticks coming out and said, "Let's check out the enemies." He immediately waved his hand and ordered the skeletons to attack. They charged at the ghostly dogs and fought them. He saw that the skeletons were strong despite being just bones. They were roaring. They were fighting. They were punching. They even managed to kill a larger ghostly dog. After a while, his army had won, and he was surprised to see the battlefield littered with the corpses of the ghostly dogs. Was it that easy? He smiled and said, "This is quite useful. It saves a lot of resources. No one needs to fight. Just this skeleton army can handle it." Kazel smiled, pleased, and said, "Not just useful, it's great." Kai also smiled and said, "With the right equipment, they'll be even stronger." Chris turned around and asked, "Do you feel tired or lacking anything?" He replied, "I'm fine. I'm still okay." He blushed, looking proud when she praised him. "Summoning many undead consumes a lot of mana." "You're really talented," he said. "If we use attack magic here, it'll consume even more mana, so we need to explore and see how far we can go." He smiled, his eyes shining. "Great, let's go all the way to the end today." Castle was excited, laughing. "Ha, I love fighting. This is a great opportunity." Kai agreed, but reminded everyone, "Let's not let our guard down." The old man's fist slammed onto the table in anger. The president's sorcerer looked helpless, holding his head. "Damn it, we missed it again." Mark, holding a phone, read out, "Everyone in the group has tried, but no one can buy it." What he was looking at was the exchange list. The old man leaned back in his chair. "We have to go to the black market to buy those cards. They're selling other people's life cards for profit. We can't buy any." Suddenly, his phone beeped. He picked it up and opened it. His eyes widened in surprise. He stood up, slamming his hand on the table. "Bring the package in front of the linked door to the basement." Mark brought in the package, which was a cardboard box containing several stacks of cards and a letter. Mark opened the letter and couldn't believe that the person he had helped was the one who sold magical charms. The letter read, "Dear Sorcerer, you helped me when I was in a difficult situation. I want to repay you. The gift he sent you is 100 magical charms, a magical item that is currently trending on the website." Kim Hyunbok looked at the box of gifts, smiled with satisfaction, and said, "Didn't I tell you?" Even if the success rate of those I help is only 1, it's still worth it. He hugged the box. Now I'll let you handle finding more magical cards, Mark. I'm busy researching these. Mark reminded him, Sir, don't forget to save some for when we go to the basement. Just in case. The old man smiled, hugging the box, I know. But if I can create magical cards myself, it'll be much more beneficial. At Kim Hyunbok's house, Green looked at him. I think we need to sell more magical cards. The other 3 were eating and chatting, and he was surprised. We just sold them last time. She explained that fake cards were appearing on the market. He was unaware of this really. She said that many fake cards were being sold, but they weren't as effective as the real ones. She thought for a moment. However, they're producing and selling fake cards faster than us. The 3 of them felt a chill when she said, We need to sell as many as we can and monopolize the product. He was sweating, wanting to log out, but still smiling. Let's make as much money as we can. Several people seemed to be walking stealthily, step by step. Kim Hyunbok and 4 others were walking in a tunnel. He said following the experience passed down from the previous person, on the 3rd floor, there will be violent wolves and slimy demons. Be careful with those slimy demons, they can ruin everyone's equipment, especially Castle and Kai's equipment, which is still new. Castle and Kai were holding weapons and walking ahead, while he and Chris were following behind. He looked ahead and asked, But can we completely trust the experience of the previous person? Kai replied, Yes, the information on the 1st and 2nd floors wasn't like this. Recalling the monsters they had fought, he felt that the bosses on the 2nd floor were stronger than what the previous person had said. Back then, the 2 of them had to risk their lives to charge forward. He knew that the boss and the orc mage had both reached level 3 magic circle, much stronger than he had imagined. Not only were they strong, but they could also use magic. Remembering that giant, ferocious orc, he concluded with a sentence, But the orc was just an orc. It was eventually completely defeated. Chris smiled smugly and said, If it were stronger, I would have summoned it to our team. But it's not strong enough yet. He chuckled and laughed. Suddenly, the 2 people in front stopped. Something's off, Master. Kai turned around and said to him, We should have encountered monsters by now, but there aren't any. We should investigate the situation before proceeding. The group gathered to discuss. Chris also felt that something was off. Since we got here, I haven't sensed any life. Maybe they're all too scared to stay, Castle joked, laughing. Chris suggested that he should follow Kai's advice. He understood and said, I'll summon some spirits to scout ahead. He raised his hand, and several black spirits appeared flying around him. He used a special sign language to assign tasks to them. The spirits immediately turned around and left. Castle looked at him and asked, Are they hiding somewhere waiting to ambush us? He replied, Even though we're stronger now, we can't let our guard down. We should use our strength to scout the situation. He closed his eyes, using the spirits to scout the area. So far, he hadn't seen anything. Not even a goblin. Suddenly, he saw a strange door. He was startled and opened his eyes wide. I think I just saw something. He led the group to the door. He said, this must be the boss's room. It's the only place with signs of life. But he couldn't enter, because the room was where the previous explorers had been defeated. The door emitted a dark, ominous aura, looking very mysterious and terrifying. Castle suddenly spoke up. The boss is an undead. He was surprised and asked, Are you sure? Castle explained that as undead themselves, they could sense it. Chris also put her hand on her chin, thinking. Based on the characteristics of undead, the monsters around us, regardless of level, are difficult to deal with. In the worst case, we could be overwhelmed. He listened to her and felt a chill run down his spine. Since we're here, let's try to scout the monsters before heading back. Be careful, Chris. If the boss is undead, it will detect our spirits. He sent a spirit inside. The room was dark, emitting a black, ominous aura. His spirit approached and peeked inside. Deep inside, it was dark, but there was something. It became clearer. A dragon skeleton. Seeing this, he was immediately frightened. He stumbled and fell to the ground, trembling. What the? He was so scared that he was drenched in sweat, his voice trembling. This isn't a dream, is it? He shouted loudly, Why is this here? When they returned home, everyone was silent, not saying a word. Castle and Kai looked at each other, but didn't speak. Chris also remained silent, looking at Kim Hyunbok, who was leaning on the table, his head in his hands. He seemed to still be in shock. After he calmed down, Chris frowned and asked, "Now tell us, what did you see in the boss's room?" He remained leaning on the table, not moving. "A dragon," he said after a while. Castle and Kai were shocked upon hearing this. Chris was also flustered, touching her chin, unsure of what to say. He recalled the thing inside. A dragon with white bones. Chris sat seriously and said, "White bones aren't actually bones." He was startled and stood up. "What do you mean?" She began to explain to the group that dragons were entities that could change their form at will, so their external appearance reflected their characteristics. A dragon with white bones is a white dragon dwelling in icy mountains. The bones of a white dragon emit a cold aura that can freeze everything around it. He objected, "But I didn't see any ice or snow in the boss's room. I'm certain of that." Chris concluded, "Then the dragon must be a monster bone dragon, an undead dragon made from the bones of other creatures." He was surprised by the new term and asked again, "Monster bone dragon?" Chris replied, "Yes, monster bone dragons take a very long time to form, so the dragon you saw wasn't fully formed. I just came up with an interesting hypothesis after our last dungeon dive." He asked about the hypothesis. Chris explained the hypothesis is about the dungeon's capacity. The dungeon has different levels, and the level of monsters is arranged according to those levels. She helped them visualize it by comparing it to bottles, so the level and number of monsters are within the predetermined capacity.